It started as a joke between me and a coworker. We were talking about weird corners of the internet, the kind of places you're not supposed to look into. He mentioned a site that looked like a dating app, but hidden on the dark web, where people with, let's say, special interests meet. That night, I got home, opened Tor, and typed the address he gave me. I wasn't even looking for a date. I just wanted to see if something like that could exist. The site looked basic. A black background, white letters, no ads. No chat rooms, just profiles. The users didn't look like bots. They wrote things that felt too personal, too strange to be fake. I scrolled for a while until I saw one that made me stop. Her name was Vera Sheds. Her profile was blurry, like it was taken with an old webcam. The bio said, "Lover of transformation, collector of skins. Snakes are my teachers." I laughed at it, but something about the way she wrote got stuck in my head. There was something I definitely didn't expect with her. She was normal. I mean, yes, she was from the dark web. She had weird tastes, and she definitely had weird tastes. But besides that, she was really chill. She was obsessed with snakes. When I asked her about her snake thing, she said she admired how snakes renew themselves, how they shed their old layers to become something pure. I told her that sounded poetic. She replied, "It's not poetry, it's necessary." I didn't find that weird. She was just passionate about the things she liked. We talked for a few days. She sent me a photo so I can tell she was real. She had a way of talking that felt hypnotic. When she asked if I could come over, I hesitated. She was direct. "I want to meet you in person." I said yes, even though I shouldn't have. She sent me a message that only said, "Then I'll come tonight." The hours dragged. I cleaned up my apartment even though I didn't know why. I kept checking the window, the hallway, my phone. Around midnight, there was a knock. Just one. Slow. I opened the door halfway. She was standing there. Tall, maybe my height, wearing a long black coat even though it wasn't cold. Her hair was straight and dark, but her face, something about it didn't sit right. The skin on her cheeks looked tight, shiny in some parts, rough in others, like she'd had a bad burn or a bad surgery. Her lips didn't move much when she spoke. "You have nice skin." That was the first thing she said. I froze. She smiled, but it looked wrong, too wide. We sat in my living room. She didn't take off her coat. She looked around like she was studying the place, or maybe me. She kept her hands in her pockets. Her eyes followed every small movement I made. "Do you live here alone?" "Yeah." She nodded, satisfied. Then she leaned closer. I could smell something strange on her. Not perfume, not sweat. It was chemical, like latex or glue. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I like your neck. You have soft lines." I laughed nervously, trying to diffuse it. She didn't laugh back. She stared at me until I looked away. Every word she said after that felt heavier, like she was choosing each syllable carefully. "Tell me, do you ever think about what's under your skin?" "Not really." "You should. Most people ignore the most beautiful part of themselves, the layer they never get to see." Her tone changed. There was a strange calm in it. I tried to steer the conversation somewhere else, but she wasn't listening. She looked at my arms like a butcher deciding where to cut. When I said it was late and maybe she should go, she just smiled again. "You invited me in. That means I can stay until I finish." For a few seconds, we just sat there in silence. The TV was still on, showing some dumb reality show, the light flickering across her face. I saw it clearly then. The edges of her skin didn't line up perfectly. Around her jaw, there was a faint seam, almost invisible unless you looked hard, like a bad prosthetic glued too tight. My stomach tightened. I stood up. "I think you should go." She didn't move. She tilted her head. "Do you know what snakes do when they outgrow their skin? They split it open, piece by piece. Then she reached into her coat. I stepped back expecting a knife, but instead, she pulled out something smaller. A straight razor. The metal caught the light. She stood slow, her movements precise. Her face was blank, detached. I backed away toward the kitchen, trying to think of what to grab. My heart was racing so hard I could barely see. She followed, calm as ever, dragging the razor across her forearm. The skin peeled slightly, revealing another layer underneath, pink and damp. She smiled. It's not painful. It's beautiful. You just have to want it. When she lunged, I tripped over the chair. The razor slashed my shoulder. Not deep, but enough to make me scream. She leaned down, touched the blood with her finger, and stared at it like it was gold. Your color suits me. I ran for the hallway, clutching my shoulder. She followed without hurrying, her boots clicking softly on the floor. Every time I looked back, she was closer, still calm, still smiling. I reached the bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I pressed my hand against the wound. It burned. I could hear breathing on the other side. Then a soft knock. You shouldn't hide. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to wear you. The door rattled. She started whispering things I couldn't understand. Not English, not any language I knew. I backed away shaking, looking for anything to defend myself with. The only thing within reach was a pair of scissors. The door cracked. I heard the wood splintering. She pushed through the gap, her face half visible. The light caught it again, and this time I saw it clearly. Patches of different tones, scars, textures, none of it matched. Her left cheek looked like male skin, rougher. Around her eyes, the skin was smoother, younger. When the door burst open, I swung the scissors. They sank into her face. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage. She stumbled back, clutching her cheek, and I saw it tear open like a mask. A piece of skin hung loose, exposing raw flesh underneath. She turned away from me, pressing hard against the wound as if terrified I'd seen her. I didn't wait. I ran. The apartment door was still open from when she came in. I sprinted through it, bleeding, barefoot. I didn't look back until I was in the hallway. She was standing in the doorway, holding her face, shaking. Her voice was low, almost childlike. Don't look at me. Don't you dare look at me. She crouched down, covering her head with her arms, muttering to herself. I ran down the stairs and out into the street. It was empty. No cars, no people, just the sound of my own breathing. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner store. The clerk stared at me like I was crazy. I told him to call the police. When they went to my apartment, they found her in the exact place, crying like a maniac, refusing to move and begging the cops not to see her. I had to get stitches on my shoulder. The doctor said the cut was clean, like from a surgical blade. She knew what she was doing. It wasn't the first time. And even though she was arrested, she didn't confess any crime, and nothing could be linked to her. She was going to be in the jail, but not for long. I still feel down in my wounds. I will see her again. I work security nights at a warehouse outside of Detroit. Mostly dead hours. I check locks, walk the perimeter, drink bad coffee, and wait for the clock to crawl past dawn. Nobody bothers me out there. Just me, the silence, and my phone. I used to scroll through memes and junk videos until everything started to look the same. One night, a guy I shared a shift with told me about a stream he found on the deep web. Said it wasn't gore or fake stuff. Said it was real. I didn't believe him at first. He wouldn't even look at me when he talked about it, just stared ahead and said, "You'll know when you see it." Out of boredom or stupidity, I downloaded a Tor browser and started poking around. Dead links, trash forums, and red room hoaxes. All garbage. I was about to close everything when I found a stream. No name, no description, just a code. BRL-197. The video showed a metal door in a concrete wall. Cracked, rusted, something leaking from underneath. The stream didn't buffer. It didn't glitch. It was too clean. And yet nothing happened. Just that door. I left the tab open, stared for 10 minutes, maybe more. I didn't see anything, but I felt like I had been seen. 2 nights later, I went back. Same stream, same camera. Only now, the door had a handprint on it. Red, wet. It hadn't been there before. I watched longer this time, focused. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just outside the frame. Then the camera angle changed, just a little, lower, tilted up, like someone had picked it up and moved it by hand. Still no sound, no movements, but now the space behind the door looked darker, like the hallway had been swallowed by something. I stayed with the stream until the morning sun lit up the warehouse parking lot. No jump scares, no edits, no chat, just the feed. I told myself I was just watching a loop, that it was all part of a hoax, but the next night, the door was open. Inside, I saw a narrow hallway. The walls were stained and cracked. Every few feet, there was a hook screwed into the concrete, and on one of them hung a woman's blouse, torn straight down the back, blood smeared across the collar. There were no screams, no ambient music, just a faint dragging sound, as if someone was pulling something heavy, slow across cement. I turned the volume all the way up. That's all I heard. The feed changed every night, never drastically. The camera just pushing further down the hallway, inch by inch. On night 5, I saw a bucket filled with clothes. Scarves, sandals, hair ties. All women's, all stained. The same dragging sound kept looping, never getting closer, never fading. Then came the night when the hooks weren't empty anymore. The first time I saw one occupied. I stared so long I forgot to breathe. A body, limp, barefoot, tied at the ankles, swinging slightly like someone had just stepped back after hanging it. The skin was bloated, the face swollen beyond recognition. That was when the timestamp appeared. Bottom right, 4:12 a.m. / barely. I Googled it. A city in India. Seemed random until I found the name attached to it. Kuladip Gangravar, the butcher of Bareilly. 9 murders, women only. Strangled with their own clothes. Arrested last year. I clicked deeper. News reports, old forum threads, message boards that had been inactive for months. Everything about Gangravar pointed to a cold case solved. But that couldn't be right. The stream was live. The timestamp matched India's time zone. The clothes, the bodies, the environment. It was real. One of the deeper articles mentioned the butcher collected trophies. Lipstick, bindis, scraps of fabric. Police found them in his house, neatly sorted in boxes. The stream started showing them too. A shelf appeared on the left side of the hallway. Lipstick tubes lined up like bullets. I still remember the 4th one from the left. A deep red color, the cap chewed like someone bit into it. A week later, I saw the same lipstick stain on the lips of the next body that showed up on camera. She was still alive at first. Her hands twitched. Then they stopped. The dragging sound didn't loop anymore. It got louder, real, pacing. 3 nights later, I saw her face. A woman bound to a metal chair in what looked like a storage room. No windows, cement walls. Her wrists were tied with some kind of cloth. Her mouth gagged with a knotted scarf. The lighting was dim, but she was definitely alive. Her eyes were wide. She kept looking at something behind the camera. The sound of boots echoed, heavy, measured. The kind of steps someone takes when they're not in a rush. The woman started shaking. Her breathing grew faster. You could hear her trying not to cry through the gag. Then a hand entered the frame. It touched her shoulder, slow, possessive. The hand was scarred, the skin cracked, fingernails black with grime. Whoever it belonged to didn't speak, just circled her once out of view. The woman squirmed harder. He returned, holding something in his other hand. A piece of fabric twisted in a noose. He held it up, like showing it to the camera. The screen cut to static. The stream came back the next night. Same room, but now it was empty. The chair was still there, the restraints cut. The floor had fresh streaks, red, thick. There was a plastic bag propped up on the table. Inside was something that looked like a scalp. Long black hair, still tied back in a braid. The chair wasn't empty for long. The camera cut, then came back, and a new woman was tied down. This one screaming behind the gag. Screaming so hard, it sounded like her lungs were giving out. There was no one else in the frame, just her, and then the footsteps again. It hit me then. The camera wasn't stationary. It wasn't CCTV. It was handheld. Someone was holding it, watching. 3 days later, I got an email. I hadn't signed up for anything. It just appeared in my inbox. Subject, we saw you watching. No message, just a file. A still from the stream. Only now, the camera was facing a wall with my name on it. My full name, written in blood red paint, dripping fresh. I threw up. I tried wiping the email from my drive, deleted everything, burned the USB. But the file kept coming back. I'd deleted it, emptied the trash, and there it was again the next day. The file size kept changing. Then I got a second email. It had a short video clip. The butcher, visible now, no mask, held up a photo. It was my ID, my Michigan driver's license. He looked straight into the camera, no expression, no blink, just stared for 10 seconds. Then the screen went black. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls. I bought a burner phone, packed a bag, and drove west without telling anyone. Every time I stopped at a gas station or a diner, I expected to see that face. I changed phones weekly, paid in cash, slept in my car. But it wasn't over. At a motel in New Mexico, I turned on the room TV and the HDMI lit up by itself. I switched to the stream. Same room, same angle. The camera was walking now, toward a door. Room number 206. That was my room. I didn't wait. I ran barefoot across the parking lot, past a truck stop, into the desert. Left everything behind. My wallet, my phone, my ID, all of it. I stayed off the grid after that night. Changed names. Never stayed anywhere more than a week. No screens, no phones. I used libraries to check maps, wrote down directions by hand. Every screen felt like a trap. Months passed. I almost believed it was over. But the fear doesn't fade. It just hides behind your routines. Then last week in a public library in Arizona, I walked past a kid watching YouTube. His screen glitched for a second. I glanced. Just a frame. Half a second. It was the chair. Same room, same lighting. The shelf in the back had a new item. A Michigan license plate. Scratched. Mine. I don't use real names anymore. I sleep in storage units, eat from vending machines. Keep it to myself. You can't explain this to anyone without sounding insane. The butcher was caught, they say. He's locked away. But someone kept the stream going. Someone took over. Or maybe he was never really caught. You don't find the stream. It finds you. You click, you watch, you think you're safe, sitting behind your keyboard half a world away. Then the screen shifts. The camera moves. The door opens. And it's your name on the wall. This story is based on real events connected to Kuladip Kumar Gangrawar, known as the Butcher of Bareilly, a serial killer from Uttar Pradesh, India. Between 2023 and 2024, Gangrawar targeted women between the ages of 45 and 65, luring them into isolated sugarcane fields before strangling them with their own clothes. He left no sexual evidence, but investigators noted consistent injuries on the victim's thighs and chins, hinting at a disturbing intent. Gangrawar often took trophies from the women: lipstick, bindis, torn scarves, storing them like mementos. His arrest in mid-2024 brought an end to a 14-month killing spree that haunted Bareilly's rural districts. Although he was captured, several elements of the case remain unclear. The methodical approach, lack of forensic trails, and Gangrawar's chilling confession led some to believe he was operating under the radar long before his first confirmed kill. Reports from villagers and unofficial forums hinted at deeper networks or accomplices, which authorities never confirmed. This fictional story reimagines what could happen if a monster like him adapted to the digital age, using the shadows of the deep web to continue his rituals, hidden in plain sight. I purchased a laptop on the dark web. I never should have bought that laptop. It turned my life completely upside down. It all started on a late-night browsing spree, the kind that often lead me down the rabbit holes of obscure dark websites offering all kinds of tantalizing offers. You could find anything imaginable there, from legal to the illegal and everything in between. That's when I found it. A listing that seemed innocent enough, buried among a jumble of more questionable items. Old laptop, perfect for refurbishing. Minimal wear and tear in good working condition, the ad read. I am a tech enthusiast who is always looking for new projects, and this one was too good to pass up. The only reservation I had was the seller's lack of reviews, and those that existed were vague, making it hard to tell if the product was legit. But the price was unbeatable, and I figured it was worth the risk. As I clicked buy now, a sense of unease settled in my stomach, but I brushed it off. I needed a distraction, and the laptop seemed like the perfect project. When the laptop finally arrived, it looked a little worn, but had a certain retro charm to it. I wiped it down, plugged it in, and powered it up. The screen flickered to life, revealing a handful of files. Most were harmless, old documents, music files, and applications, but one stood out. Do not open. It read in bold red lettering. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Curiosity gnawed at me. It had to be a joke left by the previous owner. I was a seasoned hacker. I could, of course, handle a simple file. Taking a deep breath, I clicked. Immediately, the screen filled with static. The sound was sharp, cutting through the silence and sending a chill down my spine. I wanted to close the laptop, but I continued to watch, mesmerized. The video appeared, grainy and dark. A strange-looking figure stood before a flickering candle, chanting in a language I couldn't understand. His voice was low and haunting. Suddenly, he turned to the camera, revealing his hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight through me. The video then abruptly cuts off, leaving only an eerie silence. I closed the laptop, a little taken aback but not totally shaken. It's just a video, I whispered to myself. Nothing more. But I had no idea that the real disturbances were only about to begin in my life. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of notifications. My social media accounts were filled with strange messages, and people I hadn't spoken to in years were frantically emailing, calling, and texting me. I was overwhelmed, trying to make sense of all of it. Then an old school friend called, his voice sounding shaky. He asked if I was okay, saying he'd received an email with a video of me trying to hang myself. I froze in shock. "I'm sending it now," he said. The email arrived, and my heart raced as I clicked the video. It was a grainy recording of me in my living room, standing beneath a noose. I watched in horror as I positioned myself to go through with it. I had no memory of this. I had never done anything like this.
How could this even happen? I asked myself. Just then, the doorbell rang, followed by loud banging. My stomach churned. Was it the police? Had someone reported the video? How am I going to explain any of this to them? Hesitant, I opened the door, bracing myself for a tough conversation with the police. But instead of the authorities, it was my girlfriend, Stella. Her mascara was smeared all over her face from crying, but her expression was nothing but pure fury. Without a word, she stormed in, shoving me back onto the couch. Before I could react, she kicked off her shoe and started hitting me with it. Hard, relentless blows as I tried to shield myself. "Stella, wait! I can explain!" I pleaded. "That video was fake. I wasn't trying to do anything." She paused, her chest heaving with anger, then pulled out her phone. "Explain this then," she spat, thrusting the screen in front of me. It was another video, this time of me sitting on a beach with a woman who wasn't Stella. The two of us were laughing and flirting while she sat on my lap. Tears streamed down Stella's face. "Are you saying this is fake too?" she asked, her voice cracking. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. I didn't recognize the woman in the video, nor have I ever been to the beach as well. None of it made sense, but before I could even form a response, Stella threw her shoe at me one last time and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I was left sitting there, reeling from the sheer impossibility of it all. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my parents. They said they'd received a news clip showing me in jail after a drunk driving accident. A news clip? Of me in jail? How could that even be possible? I asked myself again as I stood in my own living room, completely bewildered. My head spun as I spent the next few hours trying to calm down friends and family, assuring them I was fine and that it was all some prank. But was it really a prank? I reluctantly glanced at the laptop as a wave of dread washed over me, my heart pounding in my chest as I slowly approached it and opened it again. The screen flickered to life. This time, all of the files were gone except for two. The original Do Not Open file and a new one labeled Victims. A list appeared that was long and chilling. I scrolled down each entry, accompanied by photos and usernames from the dark web. People who were probably no longer alive. My blood ran cold when I saw my name. I was number 178, the most recent victim. My status was being shown as in progress. As I clicked on my folder, a photo of me appeared, along with details only someone who had been watching me would know. Some of the other usernames on the list were familiar too. People I'd seen online, on the dark web, in forums I frequent. I often wondered where they suddenly vanished. Now I knew why, and I realized I might be next. Panic surged through me. I slammed the laptop shut, grabbed it, and raced out the door. I drove for hours until I found a secluded spot near a dumpster. I tossed the laptop out and drove over it several times to make sure it was destroyed. For the first time in days, I felt some relief. But it didn't last long. When I returned home, my blood froze. The laptop was sitting on my desk as if it had never left. A chill crept down my spine as I stood there staring in horror. Paranoia consumed me. Right then, I knew I had a huge problem on my hands and had to find a solution for it, no matter what. So I started looking at online forums dedicated to paranormal activities and digital hauntings. Maybe, just maybe someone else had encountered a similar experience. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing furiously, desperate for answers. As I scrolled through hundreds of posts, I found one that caught my eye. It was headlined, "The Cursed Laptop." The poster detailed a story eerily similar to mine. After purchasing an old laptop from the dark web, he began receiving ominous messages and videos that terrorized the user. His advice was simple but chilling. Confront it. Do a cleansing ritual. So I researched further on the dark web, uncovering an array of rituals involving salt, candles, and incantation. I gathered the supplies, feeling both foolish and desperate at the same time. As night fell, I prepared the ritual in my dimly lit apartment, following all the instructions to the letter. I lit a row of candles on either side of the room, and drew a circle on the middle of the floor using salt. Once I stood inside the circle, I started with the incantation. Spirits of the digital realm, I call upon you to reveal yourself, I said, my voice slightly trembling. I seek an end to this torment. Nothing happened at first, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, the laptop flickered violently. The screen flashed, and the ominous file reappeared, more vivid than before. The strange figure was looking at me intently through the laptop as if he was trying to get a measure of me. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Even the light from the candles was being blocked from illuminating the room by some unseen powerful force. And then slowly, the candles started to spread a little bit of light around the room, casting a creepy-looking silhouette by my side. Right then, I felt a cold and putrid breath against my neck, and a voice whispered in my ear.
You've invited me in, Anthony.
I could feel his presence just behind the salt circle, and I realized he couldn't get closer. This was the same figure that appeared on the video first when I opened the laptop. But in real, he looked a lot more terrifying. He carefully stood at the edge of my vision, his dark silhouette blurring the boundaries of reality.
What do you want?
I shouted, my voice cracking. The figure stepped closer, its face a distorted visage of rage.
You opened the door, and now you must pay the price.
Terror clawed at me inside, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to refurbish the laptop.
It's too late for remorse.
He hissed, a chilling echo of my own fear. In that moment, I remembered the ritual. I needed to confront this entity, to assert my will. I reject you. I will not be your victim. Spirits of the digital realm, I command you to leave, I shouted at the top of my lungs. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows lengthened. I felt a pull, a tug of war between my will and the spirit's malevolent force as everything started to swirl around me. The figure roared in anger, while the screen flickered wildly as it struggled against my command. Suddenly, my room was plunged into complete darkness, and the power finally returned a few seconds later. When my gaze shifted towards the table, I realized the laptop was gone. It had disappeared. Finally, out of my life for good. Oh, thank God and the Holy Spirits. After that day, I changed all of my electronic devices. Yes, I replaced every one of them. I even deleted my email and other online accounts and opened completely new ones. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. In fact, it has been over 3 months since I visited the dark web, and I don't plan to visit anytime soon. Then I also managed to get back with my girlfriend, Stella. Somehow, I was able to convince her of my innocence. So one day, while we were on vacation and having a good time, a message suddenly appeared on my phone. Attached was a single folder. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The folder's name flashed at me in bold red lettering. Do not open.
I was the night shift doctor, alone in the north wing. The others had gone home hours ago. No patients here, just the break room, a few dark hallways, and my office. It was supposed to be a quiet night. I had my coffee, my laptop, and a stack of files. The heater rattled softly, the old vending machine hummed in the corner, and the clock ticked too loud. I didn't realize how much I hated the silence until the power cut out. The lights snapped off without warning. Not the whole hospital, just this wing. Everything went dark. The vending machine stopped, the heater died, and the glow from my laptop disappeared. For a second, I sat frozen, staring into the blackness, trying to understand if it was a normal outage. My gut twisted. Something felt wrong. I pulled out my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi. My fingers moved fast, unlocking the door and stepping into the hallway. But the moment I did, I regretted it. It was like stepping into a void The break room door was locked, windows sealed shut. I was on the second floor. No escape. I told myself to stay calm, but my hands were already shaking. I paced back to my office, checking my phone again and again. Still no signal. I sat down, trying to think, but then I heard it. Footsteps. Not one or two, but several, echoing down the black hall. My breath caught. My first thought was security, but they weren't calling out, weren't using flashlights, just walking, hunting. I crept to the door, peeking through the cracked frame. 3 figures moved smoothly past, dressed in black, not hesitating. They weren't lost. They weren't checking for people. They were looking for me. My chest tightened and I backed away, locking the door. My brain raced, trying to figure out who they were. Cops? No. Thieves? Maybe. But why here? A bang down the hall made me jump. They were breaking into rooms one by one. I slid under my desk, gripping the edge, squeezing my eyes shut for a second. The doorknob rattled. My pulse roared in my ears. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't prepared to survive this kind of night. A sharp kick hit the door, shaking the frame. I saw the outline of one man through the frosted glass. He wasn't yelling, wasn't demanding I open up. He was patient, cold. He pulled something from his pocket, worked the lock. My fists clenched as I slid under the desk, heart thudding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The lock clicked. The door creaked open, and Boots stepped in. Heavy, slow, deliberate. He kicked a chair, checked behind a cabinet, breathing steady. I bit my lip hard, eyes locked on the Boots moving closer. He crouched down, eyes meeting mine under the desk. My body jolted into action, shoving hard against the desk, sending him stumbling back as I bolted from the room. I sprinted down the hall, legs burning, lungs on fire. I could hear their feet pounding behind me, fast, determined. Every door I passed was locked, every turn felt like a trap. My mind screamed at me to keep going, even as panic closed in like a fist around my throat. I had no plan, just the raw, blind urge to survive. I tore around a corner, but one of them was already there, blocking the way. I slammed into him, struggling, shoving, trying to break free. His fist slammed into my ribs, pain exploded through my side. I staggered, pushed past him, stumbling into the next hallway. Behind me, angry voices barked orders, feet pounded faster. My chest heaved. I was running out of time. The break room loomed ahead again, still locked. I spun, heart hammering, back pressing against the wall. One of the men approached slowly, calmly, pulling a syringe from his pocket, the needle glinting in the faint light. My breath came in ragged gasps as I shook my head, trying to back away, but the wall pressed cold against my spine.
Easy, Doc. You don't want to make this harder.
I clenched my fists, then lunged, slapping the syringe from his hand. He cursed, grabbing for me, but I ducked under his arm, bolting back down the hall. My legs screamed, feet slipping on the floor as I pushed myself harder, lungs straining, every nerve screaming, but I wasn't fast enough. Another man kicked at my legs, sending me sprawling, head cracking against the cold tile. Pain bloomed, sharp and hot, as hands yanked me back. One pinned me down, another jammed the syringe into my arm. Cold liquid burned under my skin. Panic roared in my chest, but I swung an elbow back, catching one in the face. A sharp grunt, a curse, and I shoved up, breaking free. I stumbled, dizzy, vision swimming. My legs felt like lead. I clawed at the walls, forcing myself toward the only place I knew, my office. They shouted behind me, boots slamming hard on the floor. My chest heaved, vision narrowing, but I refused to stop. I crashed into my office, slamming the door behind me. My hands fumbled at the window latch, breath ragged, heart racing. I could hear them outside, shouting, kicking at the door. My fingers slipped, vision blurring, but I forced the latch open, shoving the window wide. Cold air rushed in, biting my face, jolting me slightly awake. I climbed up, body swaying. My limbs felt heavy. but adrenaline shoved me forward. The door burst open behind me. A man lunging forward, grabbing my ankle, yanking me hard. I kicked wildly, barely keeping hold on the frame. His grip tightened, and I knew I had seconds. Summoning everything left in me, I twisted violently, tearing free, and hurled myself out the window. The cold night air blasted me as the ground rushed up. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, pain exploding through my side. I lay in the snow, gasping, blinking up at the dark sky. Shapes loomed above me, white coats, shouting voices. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, machines beeping softly, light stabbing into my eyes. A colleague sat by my side, face drawn with worry. He told me they found something strange in my system, something they couldn't identify. He stayed the night, said I was lucky to be alive. Later, the police came, asking questions, scribbling in their notepads. I told them about the 3 men, about the syringe, and about the chase. They promised to track him down, to keep me safe. I smiled, thanked them, told them how grateful I was it was all over. The hospital staff, the police, even my colleagues sitting by my bed, they saw me as a victim, a lucky survivor. They thought I was clean, innocent, just another doctor caught in something bigger than himself. They were so wrong. You see, I knew about those 3 men. Those were white hat hackers. They were trying to shut down my operation. They knew what I do. They knew who I am. They know I was about to leave, and they ruined their only chance to get me. I've been running this business for years. Sometimes I told them to take terminal patients, other times healthy ones without families. Those people are from a red room. I feed the deep web what it craves. Real suffering, real blood, real death. And the people paying? They pay millions to watch. And now I've been doing this enough time to become filthy rich. Did you really think you were watching a story about survival? About a good man under attack? Were you rooting for me? That's adorable. Now I have enough money to disappear. No one will find me. Not the police, not the hackers, no one. You can take this story as my confession, or you can also take it as the words of a criminal celebrating that he is unpunished. I don't care what you think. You only need to know that I won. Good night.
7 years ago, we downloaded something we shouldn't have. It was supposed to be a messed up game from the deep web, nothing more. I wasn't looking for trouble, just something creepy to waste time on with my friend Kyle. We were both into weird stuff, but this was different. It didn't want to scare you, it wanted to get inside your head and stay there. Kyle's the one who found it. Some forum with threads buried under fake links and broken images. Most people said the game didn't exist, or that anyone who played it ended up different. That was enough for him. He dug for weeks, and one night, he said he had it. No title screen, no menu, just a black file named The Pale Door. We launched it in his basement. Lights off, headphones in. It looked like a broken walking simulator. Narrow hallways, looping corridors, and dirty textures. No enemies, no puzzles, just the sound of feet echoing off concrete, and that noise. Static layered over something else, something low, like whispering underwater. We didn't say anything while we played, we just stared. When we finished the first session, Kyle smiled. I remembered he said, "It was just starting to get good." The next day we found another file in the game folder. We didn't download it, I'm sure of that. It was named pd_message.exe. That night we loaded it up, and that's when things started to get worse. The screen went black for almost a full minute. Then one line appeared. Only one leaves. We thought it was a joke. Kyle laughed, said it was part of the ARG. Then the screen shifted, showing the same corridor but with 4 doors. He clicked the first one. Everything warped. The floor stretched, textures peeled away, then a loud, distorted scream shot through the speakers. It didn't sound like part of the game. The screaming didn't stop when we closed the laptop. It didn't even stop when we unplugged the headphones. It was in the basement with us. Loud, sharp, coming from the corner of the room like someone was stuck there, shrieking from inside the wall. Kyle dropped the laptop and froze. I remember the way he looked at me, like he was trying to figure something out. Then he said it. "It knows I picked you." I didn't go back until 2 days later. Kyle wasn't answering texts. His mom said he was sick. Wouldn't come out of his room. I climbed in through the basement window. The air inside was thick, humid. The lights were off and the screen of his laptop was still glowing, stuck on the same hallway with a symbol drawn above one of the doors. It looked like a triangle made of 3 blinking eyes. I tried to shut it off, but the keys didn't respond. The mouse moved on its own. It hovered over the 3rd door, clicked, and the hallway on screen opened into a long, dark tunnel. On the walls, images flickered. Split-second photos of people. Real people. Some of them were missing limbs. Some were just faces, burned or smashed. I stepped back. Then the laptop speakers cut out, and I started hearing something else. It wasn't coming from the screen anymore, it was upstairs. A voice repeating something in a loop. It was Kyle. His voice was low, like he was trying to keep someone calm, but the words didn't make sense. I climbed up to his room and found the door locked. I banged on it until it opened on its own. Kyle was sitting on the floor with his back to the wall, eyes wide open, muttering the same sentence again and again. "He picked wrong. He picked wrong. He picked wrong." He had drawn that triangle symbol all over the walls, in pencil, marker, and even what looked like blood. The room stank like piss and something metallic. When I asked him what was going on, he looked at me for half a second. "I told it to take me instead." I stayed there that night because I didn't know what else to do. Kyle wouldn't sleep, wouldn't eat. He just sat in the corner whispering things to himself. Around midnight, the laptop powered on again by itself. No one touched it. The screen lit up with that corridor, but now the walls were covered in the word "forgotten" over and over. I tried to shut it off again. No luck. It played something different this time. A video. Black and white, low quality, a room like Kyle's, a boy maybe 10 years old, screaming while something moved just outside the camera frame. The boy looked at the screen like he could see us. He mouthed one word. "Help." And then we heard it. A knock, not at the door, at the basement entrance. 3 times, then silence. Kyle curled into a ball. He said nothing, didn't even breathe for a few seconds. Then he started sobbing. The knock came again, louder. Then a second knock followed by something dragging across the door, slow and heavy. I wanted to run. I didn't. I grabbed Kyle's arm and told him we had to leave. But he wouldn't move. His eyes were locked on the screen. A new message had appeared. "He stays, you go." I snapped the laptop shut. The doorknob turned on its own. It didn't open, just turned back and forth like someone was testing it. Kyle started screaming. Not words, just raw screaming like an animal. His nose bled, his gums bled, and then he slammed his head into the wall. Once, twice. The door finally opened, but nothing came in. The hallway light flickered, then the shadows moved. This wasn't like a movie. There was no clear shape. It wasn't a monster. It was a presence, like something watching you from every direction at once, pressing into your skin. Kyle stood up. For the first time in hours, he moved, walked right up to the doorway. I tried to grab him. He looked over his shoulder and said something I'll never forget. "Don't follow me. It already chose." He stepped out into the hallway. The door slammed shut. All the lights went out at once. I don't remember running. I just remember the cold. The sound of things scratching at the inside of the walls as I crawled out of the basement window. I hit the ground hard and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove straight to the police. I told them Kyle was hurt. I told them everything except the game. They searched the house. The basement was clean. The laptop was gone. So was Kyle. No blood, no symbols. His mom said she never saw him come back. They think he ran away. I don't know where Kyle is. To be honest, I'm not sure if I want to know.
I lived in that house for 2 years before the night that changed everything. It was a typical college rental. the kind of place where 6 roommates split the rent and learned to navigate each other's schedules and quirks. We had parties on weekends, study sessions during finals, lazy Sunday mornings where we all crowded into the kitchen making breakfast and complaining about hangovers. It felt safe, familiar, like the kind of place where nothing truly terrible could ever happen. I was wrong about that in the worst possible way. November in northern Washington always brought early darkness and cold that seeped through the windows no matter how high we cranked the heat. That weekend started like any other. My roommates going out to parties and bars while I stayed home, exhausted from a long week of classes and part-time work. I went to bed early, around midnight, while the others were still out. The house was quiet when I fell asleep, just the usual creaks and settling sounds I had learned to ignore over the months of living there. I woke up sometime after 4 in the morning to the sound of voices. At first I thought my roommates had come home and were talking in the hallway, maybe a little drunk and louder than they realized. I remember being annoyed, thinking about how I had an early class and needed sleep, but not concerned. People coming home late was normal in a house full of college students. I rolled over, pulled my pillow over my head, and tried to drift back to sleep. Then I heard something that made my eyes snap open. A thud, heavy and solid, like something falling or being dropped on the floor above me. Then another sound, harder to describe, somewhere between a gasp and a cry that cut off too quickly. My room was on the first floor, directly below one of the bedrooms upstairs, and sound carried easily through the old floors and thin walls. I lay there frozen, listening, my heart starting to pound, even though I did not yet understand why. The house went silent again, completely, unnaturally silent. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of doors opening or closing. Just that heavy quiet that feels wrong when you know other people are supposed to be home. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe someone had dropped something or stumbled while drunk, that everything was fine and I should go back to sleep. But something kept me awake, some primal instinct that recognized danger even when my conscious mind refused to accept it. I heard footsteps then, slow and deliberate, moving through the hallway upstairs. Not the familiar rhythm of my roommates' walks, but something different, heavier, more purposeful. The steps moved from one room to another, pausing at doorways, and with each pause my fear grew stronger. I wanted to get up, to check on everyone, to call out and ask if everything was okay, but I could not move. Terror had frozen me in place, my body refusing to cooperate with what my mind was telling it to do. The footsteps descended the stairs. I could track their progress by sound alone, each step bringing whoever it was closer to my floor, closer to my room. They passed by my door, so close I could see the shadow of feet blocking the light from under the door frame, and continued toward the back of the house. I heard the sliding door that led to the backyard open and then close, and then nothing. Just silence again, deeper and more terrible than before. I do not know how long I lay there, too terrified to move, trying to process what I had heard. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, just roommates coming home drunk or moving furniture or doing something that had a perfectly reasonable explanation. But another part of me, the part that kept me frozen in my bed with my door locked, knew something was horribly wrong. When the sun finally came up, I found the courage to leave my room. The house was too quiet, none of the usual morning sounds of people getting ready for class or making coffee. I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs shaking, and that is when I saw the first door standing open, the room beyond it visible in a way that made my stomach drop. I did not go inside. I could see enough from the hallway to know I needed to call for help. I ran back downstairs, grabbed my phone with trembling hands, and dialed emergency services. My voice barely worked when the dispatcher answered, the words coming out in gasps and sobs as I tried to explain that something terrible had happened, that my roommates were not responding, that I had heard things during the night, but did not understand until now what they meant. The police arrived within minutes, flooding the house with officers and paramedics and people in protective gear. They made me wait outside while they went through the house, and I stood on the lawn in the cold morning air, watching neighbors gather and whisper, knowing from the expressions on the officers' faces that it was worse than I had imagined. 4 of my roommates were gone. The people I had lived with, laughed with, shared meals and late-night conversations with, were all dead, murdered while I slept 1 floor below. The guilt came immediately and has never left. I heard everything. the footsteps and the sounds and the moments when I could have done something, called the police, screamed, done anything except lie frozen in my bed convincing myself it was nothing. The investigators told me later that there was nothing I could have done, that calling out or intervening would have only added me to the list of victims, but that knowledge does not ease the weight of knowing I was there, alive and safe, while my friends were being killed just feet above my head. They caught him eventually, a graduate student from a nearby university who had been watching our house, studying our routines, planning his attack with the kind of methodical precision that makes my skin crawl. He confessed, avoided the death penalty, and will spend the rest of his life in prison. But that does not bring back the people who died, does not undo the trauma of that night, does not stop me from waking up at 4 a.m. convinced I can hear footsteps in the hallway. I moved out of that house the day the police cleared it as a crime scene. I could not stay, could not sleep in that room knowing what had happened above me, could not walk through those hallways without seeing the shadows and hearing the sounds that will echo in my memory forever. I left college, moved back home with my parents, and spent months in therapy trying to process the survivor's guilt that threatened to drown me. People ask me how I am doing now, if I have moved on, if time has made it easier to bear. The truth is that some things do not fade. I still check every lock multiple times before bed. I still cannot sleep on the first floor of any building. I still wake up in the middle of the night listening for sounds that should not be there, my body remembering that terror even when my mind tries to forget. The worst part is not what I saw the next morning or the months of investigation and trial that followed. The worst part is knowing that I heard everything, that for those crucial minutes when my friends needed help, I was paralyzed by fear, unable to act, and that hesitation is something I will carry for the rest of my life. I survived that night, but I am not sure I will ever truly escape it. If you ever hear something that feels wrong, if your instincts scream that danger is near, trust that feeling. Call for help. Do not wait. Do not rationalize. Do not convince yourself it is nothing, because sometimes the sounds in the dark are exactly what you fear they are, and hesitation can mean the difference between life and death. I learned that lesson too late to save my friends, but maybe someone else can learn it in time to save themselves. My GPS showed a town called Millbrook Valley directly on my route, a perfect halfway point where I could stop for gas and food during my cross-country drive through rural Montana. The map displayed it clearly, streets and buildings, and even reviews for a diner that supposedly served the best pie in the state. But when I reached the coordinates where Millbrook Valley should have been, I found only empty grassland stretching in every direction, no buildings, no roads, no sign that humans had ever lived here at all. I checked my phone 3 times, confirmed I was at the exact location the GPS indicated, but there was nothing except prairie grass and silence so complete it felt like the world had been emptied of everything except me and my car and the growing certainty that something was very wrong. I tried to search for alternate gas stations, but my phone insisted Millbrook Valley was right here, showed street view photos of a main street with shops and houses, displayed business hours for places that did not exist in the empty fields surrounding me. Then my fuel light came on. I had planned to fill up in Millbrook Valley, had been running low specifically because the GPS promised a town at this location, and now I was stranded in the middle of nowhere with maybe 20 miles of range left, and no idea which direction would lead to actual civilization. I chose east, following what my paper atlas showed as the nearest highway, but after 10 miles of driving, the GPS started insisting I had made a wrong turn, that I needed to go back to Millbrook Valley, that everything I needed was waiting there if I would just return to the coordinates. I ignored it and kept driving, but 5 miles later I saw buildings ahead, a small town appearing on the horizon exactly where my map showed only empty land. Relief flooded through me until I got close enough to read the welcome sign. Millbrook Valley, population 847, established 1952. The town my GPS had promised, somehow real now, somehow existing in a location where moments ago there had been nothing but grass. The streets were empty despite it being mid-afternoon on a weekday. Shops lined the main road with lights on and open signs displayed. but I saw no people walking, no cars parked, no movement except curtains blowing in windows and doors swinging slightly in wind that I could not feel. I pulled into the gas station, an old-fashioned place with pumps that looked 40 years out of date, and when I got out of my car, the silence was absolute. No birds or insects or distant traffic, just emptiness that felt like the world was holding its breath. The pump worked when I tried it, gas flowing normally, and I filled my tank while watching the empty street and trying to understand how an entire town could exist without people. The diner across the road had customers visible through the window, shapes sitting in booths and moving around the counter. But when I looked directly at them, they seemed to flicker, there one moment and gone the next, like images projected onto glass rather than actual solid bodies. I paid for gas at the automated pump, my credit card going through despite having no cell signal, and got back in my car planning to leave immediately. But when I started the engine, my GPS showed I was no longer in Millbrook Valley, but back at the empty coordinates where the town should have been. And when I looked up at the buildings around me, they seemed less solid, more transparent, like they were fading or like they had never been completely real to begin with. The GPS gave me directions to leave, a simple route that would take me back to the highway in 15 minutes, and I followed it desperately, driving past shops and houses that flickered like bad television reception. But 15 minutes became 30, then an hour, and I kept passing the same landmarks, the same gas station where I had filled up, the same diner with its flickering customers. And I realized the GPS was leading me in circles, showing different street names but returning me to the same locations, trapping me in this town that existed and did not exist simultaneously. I tried driving in a straight line, ignoring all roads and GPS directions, just pointing my car toward where the horizon should be and accelerating. But the streets rearranged themselves, the town stretching and bending so that no matter which direction I drove, I ended up back on Main Street, passing that gas station for the 20th time. And the GPS just kept recalculating, kept showing new routes, kept promising I was almost out when I knew I was never getting out. Other cars started appearing, parked along the streets in positions they had not been before. And when I looked inside them, I saw drivers slumped over steering wheels, some fresh and recently trapped, others decomposed to skeletons, all of them still gripping their phones, showing GPS maps of Millbrook Valley. The town was a collection, a trap that appeared on navigation apps and lured drivers to coordinates where reality was thin, where a phantom place could become solid long enough to capture vehicles and consume the people inside them. The sun never moved. I drove for what felt like hours, but the light stayed constant, stuck in perpetual afternoon, and my gas gauge never dropped below full no matter how many miles the odometer claimed I had driven. Time worked differently here, or maybe time had stopped entirely, and I was caught in a loop that would repeat until my mind broke or my body gave out, or I became like those other drivers, just another skeleton slumped behind the wheel of a car that would never escape. I am writing this on a notepad I found in my glove box because my phone died hours ago. The battery drained despite being fully charged, and I need to document what happened, so if anyone ever finds my car, they will understand this was not driver error or poor planning, but something that uses technology to hunt. The GPS is still working even with my phone dead, still showing routes through Millbrook Valley, and I understand now that the device is not trying to help me leave, but is keeping me here, is feeding something that exists in the space between where maps say things are and where they actually exist. The flickering people in the diner are watching me now. They stand at the windows with faces that are almost human, but not quite, expressions that suggest hunger and patience and satisfaction that another traveler has been collected. My GPS just announced I have arrived at my final destination, but I never entered a destination into this device, never told it where I wanted to go, and I realize it has been guiding me here since the moment I turned it on, that every route I have ever followed was leading to this phantom town, and I was just traveling the long way around before finally arriving at the place where navigation technology stops pretending to serve humanity and reveals what it has become, a hunting tool for things that exist in the spaces we cannot see waiting patiently for the next driver who trusts a glowing screen more than the evidence of their own eyes telling them to turn back before the town appears and the trap closes and the endless afternoon begins. Hello, SSG Animations. My name is Chris, and this is the most terrifying experience of my life. This happened when I was a kid, growing up in the Appalachian region of West Virginia. What you're about to hear is not fiction. This really happened to me, and 3 of my friends. For privacy, I'll use fake names. You can call them Leo, John, and Charlie. To this day, I still wish none of us had ever gone out that night. It was the summer of 2011. We had just finished 10th grade, and like most stupid teenagers, we wanted to celebrate. Someone suggested exploring an abandoned cotton mill hidden deep in the woods. I think it was called Beckley Mill, or something like that. John's older brother had been there once. He warned us not to go. That should have been enough. But we went anyway. Charlie didn't want to come at first. He had a bad feeling about it. We laughed it off, called him paranoid, and eventually convinced him. That night, we lied to our parents and said we were staying at a friend's house. By the time we met up outside our local Walmart and started walking, it was already around 5 p.m. We didn't realize how far the trail actually was. By the time we reached the area where the mill was supposed to be, the sun was already sinking. We had maybe 1 hour of daylight left. That's when we found it. The mill was worse than we expected. Collapsed walls, rust everywhere, nature slowly swallowing it whole. Still, we tried to enjoy ourselves, drinking sodas, joking around, pretending we weren't scared. That's when I noticed Leo. He wasn't talking. He was staring into the woods, with a look on his face I'd never seen before. I wanted to ask him what was wrong. I didn't. That was my mistake. By the time we finished messing around, it was fully dark. The only light came from the moon, filtering through the trees. When I checked my watch, my stomach dropped. 9:30 p.m. Leo finally spoke up. He said our parents would eventually start calling each other. We needed to leave. That's when Charlie panicked. He said he felt like someone had been watching us, like a man standing just beyond the tree line. We tried to calm him down, told him he was imagining things, but Leo didn't laugh. He just stood there, scanning the darkness. As we walked back, something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. Then we heard it. A strange, low vibration, almost like a hum. It came in short bursts. At the same time, we heard twigs snapping in the distance. Not random, intentional. We reached a clearing we recognized from earlier. Halfway across it, everyone stopped at once. I looked at Charlie. The moonlight revealed his face, and all the color had drained from it. I asked him what was wrong. He didn't answer. He was staring to his left. So was Leo. So was John. Then I looked. At first, I couldn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted. About 150 feet away, I saw it. A silhouette, tall, at least 6 feet 5 inches, unnaturally thin, like it hadn't eaten in weeks, and on its head, something that looked like a goat skull. At first, I thought it was running away from us. Then my blood turned to ice. It wasn't running away. It was running toward us, fast. We ran. John was already ahead. Me and Leo followed, but Charlie was falling behind. I knew if we didn't do something, it would get him. So we turned back. We grabbed Charlie and pulled him forward. And then I looked behind us. I wish I hadn't. It was maybe 10 feet away, roaring. A sound like a demonic scream, almost like an Aztec death whistle. It was wearing clothes, medieval-looking peasant clothes, but they were too small, like a child's Halloween costume stretched over something that didn't belong in it. The fabric was torn to shreds, and it was closing in, fast. I grabbed Leo and ran downhill as hard as I could. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it didn't catch us. That night, we never saw it again. We split up and went home. My parents didn't believe me at first. Then they saw my face. I was grounded, but something told me they knew this wasn't just a lie. Days later, I met Leo, and what he told me still haunts me. He said that thing had been stalking us from the moment we entered the trail. Every time he looked away and looked back, it was closer, 3 feet closer. Again and again. By the time we were drinking sodas, it was only 20 feet away. He didn't say anything because he didn't want us to panic. He just wanted us to leave alive. We're all doing fine now, but that night never left me. And what scares me the most is knowing what would have happened if Leo hadn't noticed it at all.
The first thing people should understand is that this trip didn't start with hope. It started because staying home with him had become unbearable. We were already fighting long before the car was packed, long before the road stretched in front of us, and long before I convinced myself that a few days away might calm him down. He drove the entire time, gripping the steering wheel like it belonged to him and him alone, deciding when we stopped, what we ate, and when we spoke. Every attempt at conversation ended with him correcting me, mocking me, or turning my words against me, so I learned to stay quiet and stare out the window. We stopped in a restaurant on the side of the road. The sign was old, the paint was cracked, and there were no other cars parked nearby. It didn't look closed, but it didn't look open either. It looked like time had stopped there and never bothered to come back. Inside, everything felt outdated and silent. One woman came out from the back, older, calm, and strangely attentive. She gave us menus and disappeared again. I remember thinking that if something went wrong in that place, there would be no one around to hear us. We sat there without talking, and the silence was sharp, not calm. He kept checking his phone, then watching me like he was waiting for a mistake. I focused on the menu even though I wasn't hungry, because looking at him felt dangerous. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't even open the message right away, but when I did, I smiled without thinking. It was a coworker asking if I could come to his birthday the following week. A normal message, nothing hidden, nothing inappropriate. That small smile was enough. His face changed instantly, his voice getting louder as he demanded to know who had written to me. When I told him it was someone from work, his tone turned ugly, sharp and fast. He accused me of talking to other men, of embarrassing him, of cheating on him openly. He started shouting things that made people turn their heads, saying I was worthless, that I gave him nothing after everything he had done for me, that I didn't even deserve to be alive. He said all of this without lowering his voice, without shame, and with a look that told me he would have gone further if we were alone. He grabbed my phone and threw it into the trash like it was nothing. He leaned close and told me that during this trip, I wouldn't talk to anyone, and when we got home, we would have a serious conversation. I stood up shaking, walking toward the bathroom, and heard him yelling behind me to stop pretending and calling me a disgusting little rat. The hallway to the bathroom felt longer than it should have, and every step made me expect him to follow me, to grab me, or to drag me back to the table. Inside, I locked the door and leaned over the sink, trying to breathe without making noise. The tension built slowly because silence with him had never meant safety. I waited, listening for footsteps, for shouting, for the door handle to move, knowing from experience that privacy was something that he didn't respect. When the door finally opened, it wasn't him. It was the woman from the restaurant. She closed the door carefully and stood next to me without asking questions, as if she already knew exactly what was happening. She spoke calmly and told me about her past, about a man who hit her, humiliated her, and treated her like a servant. She explained how her life had revolved around pleasing him, feeding him, and staying quiet until she realized she was disappearing. She told me she left, that she built this place, and that no one controlled her anymore. I listened while my face burned with shame, because every word felt too familiar. I told her thank you, but I said there was nothing I could do, that this was just how things were for me. She looked at me seriously and said there was something to do, and that she could help. When she told me to follow her into the kitchen, my heart started racing. The kitchen was clean, quiet, and smelled like old oil and soap. She opened a cabinet and took out a small bottle with cloudy liquid, telling me this was the first ingredient to starting a new life, and that it was meant for rats like him. I told her I didn't understand and that I was scared. She leaned closer and told me I didn't need to understand everything, only that she would handle what came next, that she would take responsibility, and that my only job would be to leave and never come back. The tension pressed on me as I stood there, watching her hold the bottle, because every part of me knew how dangerous this was. But another part of me remembered every time he told me I was nothing, every time he hurt me, and then blamed me for it. She poured the liquid into his plate slowly without rushing, mixing it carefully into the food. Her hands didn't shake, and her face didn't change. She told me it was done, and that I should go back to the table and wait. Walking back felt unreal. He immediately complained about how long I had taken and asked what I was doing in there. I told him I didn't feel well, and he ignored me like my words didn't matter. The food arrived quickly, and he complained again, criticizing the place and the service. The woman told us to enjoy our meal, her voice steady and neutral. I couldn't eat. I watched him closely as he started eating, every moment making my chest tighten. He kept talking, kept insulting me for being quiet, accusing me of trying to make him look bad. Then his voice cut off mid-sentence. His fork slipped from his hand, his body leaned sideways, and he collapsed onto the floor, hitting it hard and staying completely still. I stayed frozen in my chair, staring at him, while the woman calmly looked at me and pointed toward the door. I stood up and walked out, leaving everything behind. Outside, the road was empty, and the silence felt unreal. I walked without knowing where I was going, constantly expecting to hear someone shouting my name or running after me. The tension didn't fade. Every sound made me turn around. My body felt light and heavy at the same time, and my thoughts wouldn't slow down. I reached a gas station far down the road and asked to use a phone. I told them my boyfriend collapsed at a restaurant and that I didn't know what happened. My voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. Later, people asked questions. I told them we argued often and that he scared me. I said I left because I didn't feel safe. They said the cause was poisoning, but when they returned to the restaurant, it was closed and empty, like no one had been there in years. The fear stayed with me long after everything ended. Interviews, nights alone, and sudden noises kept me on edge, waiting for consequences that never came. No charges followed, no accusations were made, and no one could explain where the woman or the restaurant had gone. They said there wasn't enough evidence to blame anyone. I moved away, changed jobs, and stopped answering unfamiliar numbers. Even now, raised voices make my body tense automatically. People like to believe escape is loud and heroic, but sometimes it happens quietly and it leaves confusion behind. I don't feel strong or in control. I feel like someone who survived because another person chose to intervene. Some nights, I still wonder how many other rats were served at that table before me.
First time I realized something was wrong with Lisa, I should have left immediately. We had known each other since high school, grown up together. For many years, being with her felt inevitable, like our lives were tied together by default rather than choice. Things started to fall apart when our lives stopped moving in the same direction. I started feeling emotionally closer to someone at work, and that scared me enough to admit the truth to myself. I was no longer in love with Lisa. When I told her I wanted to separate, I expected pain, anger, maybe resentment. What I didn't expect was the way she reacted. Lisa refused to accept the breakup, and her reaction went far beyond sadness. She cried for hours, then screamed, then collapsed into long periods where she barely spoke or moved. She stopped eating regularly and barely slept. I started checking on her out of guilt rather than love. I told myself I was being kind, even though I knew staying close only confused things more. About a week later, she told me she felt physically unwell and had gone to the doctor on her own. When she came back, she sat across from me and said she was pregnant, already a few months along. She said this explained everything and that we had no choice but to stay together. I was stunned, and my first reaction was disbelief mixed with panic. But I didn't accuse her of lying. She cried and said she needed me, that the baby needed us. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try again. We reconciled quickly, moved back into routine, and I even proposed. It felt like the responsible thing to do. Lisa became calmer, focused on the pregnancy, and I threw myself into work to avoid thinking too much. As the weeks passed, small things began to feel off. Lisa always went to medical appointments alone or with relatives, saying it was a private experience and that pregnancy brought up things she wasn't ready to share. She also told me not to look at her stomach because it caused her anxiety, and she asked me to respect that boundary. I did, even though it felt strange. Her belly did grow, and that was enough to quiet my concerns. I told myself I was overthinking it. In the following weeks, there was a lot of tension between us. She was very stressed about the pregnancy until she joined a charity group that rescued stray dogs, which surprised me because she never liked animals before. She talked about it with intense enthusiasm, saying it gave her purpose and helped her focus on the future. I felt relieved, even proud, because it looked like she was finding balance again. That's where she met Sarah, another pregnant woman who was due around the same time. Lisa talked about her nonstop, and soon Sarah started visiting our apartment. They sat for hours discussing pregnancy, parenting, and future plans. They always talked about how our children would grow up together and be great friends. I met Sarah's husband, and we started having dinner together. I hadn't felt that hopeful in years, and that made me blind. We'd never been so happy, even as a couple. Everything was fantastic, until the day Lisa gave birth. One morning, a stranger called me, telling me that Lisa had been found on the street, holding a newborn baby. When I arrived, there were people gathered around her, whispering and staring. Lisa was sitting on the pavement with the baby pressed against her chest, both of them covered in blood. Her clothes were soaked, her hands were shaking, and her face looked pale and distant, like she wasn't fully there. She kept repeating that the baby was fine, and that everything was okay, even though nothing about the scene looked okay at all. I was angry, confused, and terrified all at once, asking why no one had helped her and how this could have happened without anyone calling me. Someone had already called an ambulance, and when the paramedics arrived, they tried to take the baby to check him. Lisa reacted immediately, pulling the baby closer and screaming that no one was allowed to touch him. She refused to stand up, refused to answer questions, and kept insisting that they didn't need a hospital. Watching her fight them felt unreal, like I was looking at someone I didn't fully recognize anymore. The paramedics had to force her onto the stretcher, and I followed the ambulance in my car, my thoughts spinning out of control. I kept telling myself that births could go wrong, that shock did strange things to people. But deep down, I knew this behavior wasn't normal. At the hospital, everything moved fast, but not in a reassuring way. Doctors separated Lisa from the baby despite her protests, and security had to intervene again because she refused to calm down. A doctor finally pulled me aside and spoke carefully, choosing words that already sounded wrong before I fully understood them. He said Lisa showed no physical signs of pregnancy or childbirth, no signs of labor, no signs of recovery, nothing that matched her story. I argued, raised my voice, insisted there had to be a mistake, but the doctor didn't waver. Not long after that, police officers arrived and asked to speak with me. They asked about Sarah, and the moment they said her name, my stomach dropped. One of them told me that Sarah had been found dead in her home earlier that day. She had been murdered. Her abdomen had been cut open, and her baby was gone. They told me that Lisa was the last person to see Sarah alive, that phone records and messages confirmed it. They told me the baby Lisa brought in matched Sarah's pregnancy timeline, not Lisa's. I felt dizzy, like the floor was tilting under my feet. The investigation moved quickly, and there was no room left for denial. Medical tests confirmed that Lisa had never been pregnant at all. The growing belly, the appointments, the symptoms, all of it had been fabricated. The baby wasn't ours. He was Sarah's. Police explained how Lisa had planned everything in advance. the fake pregnancy to keep me from leaving, the charity group to meet vulnerable women, the careful choice of Sarah because they were supposed to be due at the same time. Every step had been calculated, patient, and deliberate. When I was finally allowed to see Lisa, it was through a glass partition at the police station. She looked exhausted, but calm, and when she spoke, she didn't sound desperate. She said she had done what she had to do, and that this was the only way we could have a family. Hearing her say that made my chest tighten in a way I can't properly explain. The baby was returned to Sarah's family, and I never tried to see him again. Court hearings followed, and I attended them all, listening as the crime was described in full detail. Each time it felt like the air was being pushed out of my lungs, but I stayed silent because there was nothing left to say. Lisa was sentenced to death. I didn't feel relief or justice. I didn't feel like anything had been resolved. It felt like the ending to a story I never agreed to be a part of. I think constantly about the signs I ignored and the moments I explained away because facing the truth would have been uncomfortable. I trusted someone completely, and that trust was used to destroy another family. Lisa Montgomery was an American woman convicted of murdering Bobby Jo Stinnett in 2004 by strangling her and cutting her abdomen open to steal her unborn baby. Montgomery had pretended to be pregnant for months and used that lie to gain Stinnett's trust before attacking her in her home. The baby survived and was returned to the family, while Montgomery was arrested the same day and later in 2021 sentenced to death, becoming the first woman executed by the U.S. federal government in nearly 70 years.
This is the story of the most terrifying first date I ever had, which could have ended my life. Back then, I was 19, and I was pretty much in love with a guy. I had known Daniel from the neighborhood for a long time. As we grew older, we became friends, but the chemistry between us was always there. When he finally asked me out on a real date, I felt so happy and nervous at the same time. I took extra time getting ready, wanting everything to be perfect. In my mind, this was the beginning of something great. We went to dinner and it was so romantic. The candles on the table, the quiet music, low lights. We had an amazing time till midnight. When we walked outside afterward, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. That was when he asked if I wanted to do something a little crazy together. I said yes because I was young, curious, and convinced that nothing truly bad could happen to me. He suggested going to Provo Canyon for a walk. He said he liked walking there because it helped him relax, and he talked about how clear the stars looked away from the city lights. His tone was calm, like it was something he had done many times before. We drove there together, talking the whole way, still laughing, still feeling close. When we parked on the side of the road, the darkness felt deeper than I expected, but I did not want to ruin the mood or look scared over nothing. The path was narrow and uneven, and the trees blocked almost all the light. I remember thinking that if something happened, no one would hear us, but I forced that thought away. We joked about how dumb the idea was, walking into the woods on a first date, but the jokes slowly faded as the darkness grew thicker. We kept going anyway. We both wanted the night to feel special. The deeper we went, the quieter it became, and our conversation slowed until it stopped completely. I noticed that we were both listening more than talking, paying attention to every small sound around us. That was when I realized we were much farther in than I had planned, and the road felt uncomfortably distant behind us. We did not say it out loud, but both of us started walking faster at the same time, as if we shared the same thought without admitting it. The silence took over everything. Then we heard a noise behind us, sharp and sudden, like a branch snapping under weight. It did not sound random, and it did not sound far away. Daniel turned his head first, then I did the same, but the darkness hid everything beyond a few feet. We kept moving, faster now, pretending it was nothing, pretending this was still under control. Another sound followed, heavier than the first, and this time it felt closer, like whatever made it was following our path. Daniel stepped to the side and his foot slid on something soft. He stopped suddenly, annoyed at first, then confused. He bent down, thinking it was mud or a dead animal, and that was when his entire body stiffened. His reaction scared me more than anything else. His face lost all color, his mouth opened, and his eyes stayed locked on the ground. When he finally spoke my name, his voice broke, and I knew something was very wrong. I looked down where he was staring, and my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. A woman's body lay twisted on the ground, damaged in ways I did not want to fully process. Parts of her were missing. I screamed desperately. Before running away, I felt something else, something worse than fear, the clear sense that we were not alone anymore. I lifted my head and scanned the trees. That was when I saw him. A man stood partially hidden among the bushes, not close enough to see clearly, but close enough that I knew he was watching us. He did not move at first. He was measuring us. The man took a slow step forward, and that single movement was enough to break whatever control we had left. We ran as fast as we could. Behind us, footsteps followed, fast and heavy, crashing through branches without hesitation. I could hear him gaining on us, and the sound made my chest tighten in panic. I did not dare look back because I knew that if I saw him closer, I might freeze, and stopping even for a second felt like a death sentence. When we finally broke through the trees and reached the road, we quickly got into Daniel's car. We drove away as fast as we could, leaving the canyon behind. But the fear stayed with us the entire drive. We barely spoke on the way to the police station. Every sound made us flinch, and Daniel kept checking the mirrors, convinced we were being followed. I sat stiff in my seat, replaying the image of the body over and over, unable to push it away. At the station, we told everything exactly as it happened. The officers listened, took notes, and went out to the canyon with flashlights and patrol cars. We waited, holding on to each other, trying to stay calm. When they came back, their faces told the story before they spoke. They found nothing. No body, no blood, no signs of anything unusual. They asked careful questions, suggesting stress or imagination without accusing us directly. I felt frustrated and scared because I knew what I saw, and the fact that it was gone made it worse, not better. Over time, the incident became something we talked about less and less, and eventually, neither of us wanted to relive it constantly. Daniel and I are still together to this day. Years later, we were sitting together watching a crime program, barely paying attention when the tone of the interview changed. The man on screen spoke calmly, methodically recounting how he had murdered dozens of women, until the journalist asked him if he had ever been on the verge of being discovered before being arrested. When he mentioned Provo Canyon, both of us went still. The room felt suddenly very quiet, and every word demanded our attention. He described killing a woman and leaving her in the woods. He talked about hiding when he heard people coming, about watching a young couple walk into the scene, about realizing he would have to kill them too. He explained how they escaped, how lucky he was, and how he managed to clean everything and leave no evidence behind. He spoke about it like it was a clever move. I felt sick as the realization settled in, slow and heavy. This man was talking about us, about that night, about how close we came to dying. When the interviewer said his name, Ted Bundy, the last piece fell into place, and the fear I thought I had left behind came rushing back stronger than ever. Ted Bundy was one of the most dangerous serial killers in American history, responsible for the deaths of dozens of women during the 70s. He was known for being charming, intelligent, and trustworthy, which made him even more terrifying. Daniel and I sat in silence after the program ended, both of us fully aware of how thin the line had been between survival and disappearance. We had escaped only because timing worked in our favor. I still think about that night, about how easily things could have gone differently, and how close we were to becoming another story told on a screen. The woods happened to be darker than I'd ever seen them that night, almost like I was in some sort of void that swallowed all the light within it. My flashlight was useless, and as I got closer to the horrific screams of my best friend, I found myself fighting the urge to turn around and flee. Leaving Malcolm behind wasn't a decision I was ready to make, though. But when I came face to face with what was supposed to be my best friend, with wet chunks of skin peeling from its body, it became clear to me that I had fallen for a trick, and whatever had called me here was never Malcolm. Instead, it appeared to be the devil itself. My name is Jonathan Shepard, and in the spring of 2023, I was invited back home to Davidson, North Carolina, for the burial of my friend Malcolm's dad. The memorial was held at their cabin home, and Malcolm, who'd been my childhood best friend, was someone I hadn't seen in months. While I felt things wouldn't be that different, I quickly realized after arrival that the Malcolm I'd known and the person I was meeting today were very different people. "Hey man, I'm so sorry for your loss." Malcolm said nothing when I first gave him my condolences. Instead, he remained laser-focused on something in the corner. I followed his gaze and noticed he was staring at Cooper, the family dog they'd had since childhood. I spoke again to get his attention. "Malcolm? Huh? Oh, Jonathan. It's good to see you, man. When did you get in?" "Just this morning. I'm sorry about your dad." "Oh, yes, we all are." Once again, his gaze drifted toward the dog, and there was a visible look of disgust on his face. Concerned, I decided to ask, "Hey, you keep staring at Cooper. What's up with that?" He looked at me confused and replied, "Cooper? Your dog? Oh, that thing. Something's wrong with that thing, but no one believes me." "Something's wrong with it? What, like it's sick or something?" "Oh, please, I wish that thing was sick. Hopefully it'd just die and stop making my life hell. No one fucking believes me when I say it, but that is not our fucking dog." The dog had also been staring at us this whole time, completely still, almost like it was trying not to move. Still, what Malcolm was saying was crazy, and I wondered to myself what else the dog could be. "Listen, man, I came back a couple weeks ago from my Iowa trip, 'cause Dad was sick, and when I got here, that thing just went crazy. Wouldn't stop barking and staring at me like it didn't want me to see what it was doing here." "Well, it seems fine to me." "Yeah, 'cause they had to take it to the vet. But listen, that thing needs to be put down immediately." I could see the genuine concern in Malcolm's eyes. This wasn't the type of thing you'd focus on during your father's burial, but after speaking to his mom and others, they'd said it was something that had consumed him since he got home. For the rest of the day, I began to intentionally look out for the dog, and sure enough, wherever Malcolm was that day, the dog wasn't too far away, staring. Later at night, Malcolm's mom asked if I wanted to go up with her to clear out his dad's bedroom, as she'd been putting it off for a while, and was finally ready to get it over with. Once we got to the room a few minutes after getting into the cleaning, Malcolm's mom broke down into tears. After I comforted her and told her I could do it alone, she left, and I continued putting things away. Under the pillow, there was a journal that looked familiar. I remembered Malcolm's dad had a thing for poetry and used to read some of it to me when I was younger, so I sat for a moment and began flipping through the pages. What caught my attention was that as I neared the end of the book, I noticed a change from poetry to what seemed like day-to-day entries in the journal. Malcolm's dad seemed concerned about something in his home. He claimed the thing was deceptive, and although he was a sick old man, he was certain it wasn't who it said it was. As I read it, I couldn't help but notice how similar his words seemed to Malcolm's earlier that day. The last entry in the journal stood out to me the most, however, and as I read it, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. My time on this earth is coming to an end, and for the life I've lived, I am content. However, a part of me fears for my family and those in my home. The devil that wears the face of my beloved is not who it says it is. If anyone would know, it would be me. I have tried to warn them,
but I am not strong enough to convince anyone. I pray the evil leaves my home after I'm gone, and that the Lord protects my family when I will no longer be able to." As soon as I finished reading, a gut-wrenching scream tore through the silence and startled me. Shortly after, while clearly in pain, the person screamed, "Help, help me, please." I recognized Malcolm's voice almost immediately and hurried down the stairs to the rest of his family. All the guests had already left by that time, but I was worried by the fact that I couldn't find Malcolm's mom or anyone else in the house. "Help, please, anyone." The screams seemed to be getting louder. This time it sounded like his mother, and my hands trembled in fear. I wondered what the hell was happening, and the words of Malcolm's dad continued to run through my mind. Could this be what he was talking about? Still, I realized there was no time to ponder as I needed to help Malcolm and his mother. So I called the cops, gave them our location, and followed the voice out into the heart of the woods. The darkness swallowed all the light, and my flashlight only seemed to be able to show what was directly in front of me. As I walked deeper, the raw, piercing screams got louder and alternated between Malcolm's and his mother's, both pleading for help. After every scream was dead silence. No wind, no insects, no leaves. Only my footsteps could be heard along with the screams, and I knew that when nature was silent, it was a sign to turn and run. I couldn't bring myself to abandon them, however, so despite how much I trembled, I rushed forward, my heart racing, determined to get to them and help. As I moved through the woods, I could feel the screams getting closer and closer until I got to a clearing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it and immediately stopped in my tracks. My heart sank, and my throat began to close up as the realization that I would probably die slowly dawned on me. Sitting in the center, hunched over, was Malcolm, or at least what wore his face. Wet chunks of skin lay on the ground around him and continued to fall off his body, revealing raw muscle and bone underneath. A foul stench of rot and something ancient filled the air, and I fought the urge to throw up from how disgusting it smelled. And its eyes, Malcolm's eyes, locked onto mine as it spoke. "Jonathan," it said in Malcolm's voice. Then it spoke again, this time in his mother's voice. "You came." The creature began to laugh in a deep, heavy tone that shook the ground underneath us. This wasn't Malcolm. It had never been Malcolm. This was the thing his father had warned about, the devil wearing familiar skin. "You people are all so similar, all so gullible. You all can never resist the urge to help your loved ones in danger. That connection is what killed Malcolm when I first took his skin back in Iowa. That's what killed his pathetic mother earlier this night, and that's what is about to kill you, Jonathan." I fell back in horror as the creature approached. More skin fell from its flesh, and it continued to laugh in different voices, almost like it was taunting me. Then, out of nowhere, Cooper burst through the trees and lunged at the creature. "You disgusting little mutt." The creature struggled to peel Cooper off it, and while I'd hoped the outcome could have been different, I knew I only had a few seconds before Cooper was dead, and I would be next. So I ran. I turned and ran through the woods toward the distant sirens and red and blue lights. Then, once I got to the police, I began to mumble my words. I knew how crazy I was about to sound to anyone who heard the story. I knew they'd never believe me. No one would. But they had to know. Everyone had to know what had happened. So I spoke. "Help me. Help me. There's a skinwalker in the woods." My name is Ethan. I'm 32, and until 2 years ago, I believed every strange story had a rational explanation if you looked hard enough. That certainty died during one night in the Arizona desert, when something that shouldn't have known my mother's voice spent hours trying to talk me out of our truck. My brother Caleb loved photography, and that October he talked me into a weekend shooting the stars near Monument Valley. We packed up and drove out before sunrise, reaching a stretch of desert so isolated we hadn't seen another vehicle in an hour. Caleb found a clearing off an old dirt road. No cell service, no lights for miles, just a sky that looked like someone had spilled powdered glass across black velvet. For a couple of hours, it felt like the most peaceful place on earth. Looking back, that was the last time either of us felt normal. It started with the silence, not ordinary quiet, but the kind that feels wrong once you notice it. No insects, no coyotes, no wind. Caleb froze mid-adjustment on his camera. "Do you hear that?" I listened. "Nothing." "Exactly," he said. I walked a few meters off to stretch my legs and stopped cold. Footprints, fresh, not ours, emerged from the dark and walked in a slow, deliberate line toward the truck. The sand around them was untouched, no trail leading away, no explanation for how they'd gotten there. They simply ended, 3 feet from the driver's door. The stride was too long, the toes too narrow, the impressions too deep for any normal weight. "They don't stop because someone disappeared," Caleb said, refusing to look away from them. "They stop because whatever made them doesn't need footprints anymore. My Navajo co-worker told me, if you hear something calling you out here, or find tracks that make no sense, you don't investigate. You leave." Then a whistle drifted across the dark behind us. Soft, playful. It came again, closer. Never loud enough to place, just close enough to know it had moved. We packed the truck in a rush, hands shaking, saying nothing. That's when the voice came. "Ethan?" It was my mother's voice, not similar, exact, down to the way she stretched my name when she wanted my attention. She'd been dead 6 years, but for one impossible moment I forgot that. And I took a step toward it, before Caleb slammed both hands into my chest and shoved me back against the truck. "Your mom never called you sweetheart," he said, and my blood went cold. She hadn't. She only ever called me Bug. The voice had copied everything except the one detail that mattered, and somewhere in the dark, something laughed, a sound like someone remembering how laughter worked after years of forgetting it. Caleb threw the last camera in and we peeled out down the dirt road. In the side mirror, something kept pace with the truck, not running, just gliding through the brush at 50 miles an hour without ever falling behind. Then my phone buzzed. No signal, no bars, and a missed call from Mom, a number disconnected since her funeral. It rang again. When it stopped, a voicemail appeared out of nowhere. I played it. Static, breathing, and then her voice, quiet and patient. "I can see you now." Something slammed into the side of the truck and sent us skidding to a stop near a ravine. Then came the scraping. Not claws, not nails. Something harder, like bone dragging across the metal, moving deliberately from the front bumper to the back. It stopped beside my window. I turned my head slowly. There was no face in the glass, only my own reflection, until it smiled, wider than my mouth had ever moved, wider than a mouth should move at all. Then it lifted one finger on the other side of the glass and tapped once, asking to be let in. It stepped sideways, out of the reflection entirely, and a shape unfolded from the dark just beyond the window. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin. "Don't look at its face," Caleb whispered, eyes locked on the road, "because that's how it learns." The radio crackled to life on its own. My own voice came out of the speakers, perfectly copied. "Caleb, open the door. It's safe now." Then it laughed, because it knew we'd recognized it. Caleb ripped the radio out by the wires. The laughter didn't stop. It just moved outside, circling us. Then the truck dipped under a weight that climbed onto the roof. Footsteps slow and curious, each one followed by a faint, wrong-angled clicking, like joints bending the way they shouldn't. Then silence. Ahead in the road stood a coyote. Too thin, standing too straight, its eyes reflecting no light at all. It opened its mouth and spoke in Caleb's voice, "Ethan." Then its front legs bent backward with a series of sickening cracks, and it rose onto 2 legs, taller than the truck, arms hanging past its knees, head tilted at an angle no neck should allow. It smiled and started walking toward us, unhurried, certain, like something that had never lost anything it wanted to catch. Caleb floored it. The figure didn't move. We drove straight through where it stood, and the headlights passed through empty air. Nothing there. Nothing behind us either, just empty desert and a cloud of dust. Then Caleb whispered, "Don't look in the mirror." I looked anyway. Sitting in the back seat, where thousands of dollars of camera gear had been stacked seconds earlier, was a silhouette, hands folded neatly in its lap, face hidden in shadow. It leaned forward, close enough that I felt warm breath on the back of my neck and whispered in my own voice, "You finally looked." The truck swerved around oncoming headlights, and when I looked back, the seat was empty. Our gear was exactly where we'd left it. We didn't speak again until we reached a gas station, bright and ordinary and full of people who had never looked more comforting. Caleb went straight for the restroom. The cashier looked at me strangely. "You boys camping out there?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Then who's the third person?" I froze. "The tall one," he said, pointing at our truck, "standing in the bed of your pickup." I spun around. The truck was empty. When I turned back, his face had gone from confused to something closer to afraid. "Never mind," he said quietly. "I guess I was mistaken." We never spoke about that night again. Caleb sold his camera equipment within a week and moved across the country 6 months later without explaining why. I wish I could tell you it ended there. 3 nights ago, I woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. to a single knock on my apartment door. No one was in the peephole. I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt while one voice begged me not to open it, and another, just as familiar, laughed softly and told me it was safe. Same breathing, same pauses, same fear. By sunrise, the hallway was empty, no footprints, no footage, and Caleb swore he'd been asleep in another state the whole night. Sometimes, just after midnight, I still hear a single knock. I never answer it, because if something can learn the voices of the people you love, how do you know you haven't already let it in?
How much do you know about skinwalkers? If you think they didn't exist, I must admit that I used to believe the same as you. But even if you think I'm crazy, I'll tell you that they are very real. And now, I will tell you when I saw one. That afternoon, I woke up 10 minutes before the alarm clock went off. The room was completely silent. My wife was away on a business trip and the house felt emptier than usual. I stretched out on the bed and struggled up, feeling the weight of the prosthesis on my right leg. It had been an accident at work, and although at first I liked the idea of not working, then I remembered that I couldn't do anything on crutches. The dog, Max, slept at the foot of the bed as usual, but something had made him nervous. He was growling a lot more than usual. At first, I thought he was just dreaming, but then he jumped up and ran out the basement door, barking. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Max's barking grew louder with each passing second. His claws scraped the wood as he tried to open it. There was nothing in the basement. Still, something made my dog, who usually didn't get upset over anything, react that way. I carefully climbed down and Max kept at my side, growling low. When I got to the basement, I turned on the light and looked around. Old boxes, tools, and forgotten furniture were still in place, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. "Max, there's nothing here." The dog was still restless, sniffing the air with bristling fur. I reached over and petted him to calm him down. Finally, he stopped growling, although he didn't relax completely. I decided he was paranoid for nothing. Maybe he had heard something on the street and had overreacted. I shrugged and went upstairs again, just as the alarm clock in my room began to go off. It was time to pick up my daughter from school. I trudged the 2 blocks to my daughter's school. Using crutches to get around was a bloody nightmare, especially in the summer heat. Still, I didn't complain. There was no time for regrets when I had a child depending on me.
Dad, can I play with Max when we get home?
Of course, honey, but don't bother him too much. Something about the way Max had reacted earlier still bothered me, but I didn't want to worry her. When we got home, Max greeted us at the door, but something about him wasn't right. He didn't bark or jump as usual. Instead, he stood still, staring at us. almost as if he was studying every move we made. His gaze was fixed and penetrating, so much so that for a moment I thought he was behaving like a stranger. My daughter, however, didn't seem to notice.
Come on, Max. Let's go.
I stood in the hallway, watching the dog. Max didn't move an inch, his eyes still locked on me, as if he was waiting for something. I thought to myself that he was being ridiculous. Surely he wanted me to give him more food, and he must have thought I was mad about what happened in the basement, and this was his way of asking for forgiveness. After a few hours, I started to worry about Max. Every time I moved or made a noise, I could feel his eyes on me, as if he was watching me. Eventually, I decided to ignore him and focused on making dinner. After a few minutes, my daughter came downstairs for dinner. Max was following her closely, but not in his usual playful way. He stood by her side, now staring right at her.
Dad, Max doesn't want to play with me. He just follows me around and stares at me.
It's okay, honey. Maybe he's tired. As I was setting the table, the lights in the house flickered once and then went out completely. We were in complete darkness. Stay here. I stood up and grabbed a flashlight from a nearby drawer. I turned it on and the light revealed Max's serious face, still watching us from the edge of the kitchen. My heart was pounding as I made my way to the basement. The only logical explanation was that the fuses had blown. As I reached the basement, I could hear a muffled sound, as if someone was moving around down there. This was no good. I couldn't go down there until I took action. I knew the best thing to do was to escape with my daughter, but maybe it was nothing, and if there was something, I had to take advantage of the fact that she was in the basement before she entered the house and hid somewhere. I know what everyone is thinking, and at the time, I didn't think about locking the man in the basement. But in a tight situation, no one can blame me for not doing the obvious. I told my daughter to go to her room, and I made sure the door to my daughter's room was securely locked and that Max was inside with her. Hey, buddy, go take care of her, okay? I went down to the basement with the flashlight, noticing that the sound had stopped. When I reached the top of the stairs, I shone the light on the stacked boxes and furniture. Suddenly, the flashlight picked up something on the floor. I cautiously moved forward and saw it clearly. It was Max, or at least what was left of him. His body was mangled, his fur covered in dried blood. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. That's when I heard my daughter scream from upstairs. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, despite the pain in my leg. When I reached her bedroom door, I found it closed, but I could hear her crying on the other side. I pulled on the handle with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. Sweetie, I'm here. Open the door. I tried to hit it with my body again and again until it finally gave way. When the door opened, what I saw took my breath away. Behind the door was Max, only that wasn't Max. That thing was standing on two legs with the mouth stretched into an inhuman grimace, gripping my daughter's arm with its teeth. My daughter stood there, eyes wide open, panic reflected in her gaze. Her arm dangled weakly from the creature's mouth, but she didn't scream, as if fear had paralyzed her. I tried to move forward, but the creature lowered its gaze to the arm I held, as if it was considering biting harder. The creature did not react like an animal. It did not recoil or show signs of fear. Instead, it let go of my daughter's arm, allowing her to collapse to the ground and get back on all fours. Before I could move, the creature gave a look that seemed to taunt me, and with one swift, brutal moment, grabbed my daughter around the waist with its jaw and jumped out the window. I heard the glass shatter into 1,000 pieces, and my daughter's piercing screams faded along with the beast. I was paralyzed. I fell to my knees, unable to get up, crutches falling at my side. I tried to crawl towards the window, but I knew it was no use. There was no way to follow that thing. All I had left was the image of my daughter being dragged by that creature. When the police arrived, I couldn't articulate anything coherent. I told them what had happened, every detail, but it all sounded absurd. They searched the entire house, searched the basement where they found Max's body, but when they inspected the outside, there was no sign of my daughter or the creature. The officers tried to console me, saying they would send out search teams and that they would do everything they could do to find her, but their eyes said otherwise. They didn't believe me. They thought I was out of my mind, that I had done something with my daughter after I lost my mind. My daughter never appeared. They searched for days but found nothing, not a trace, not a clue. The case remained unsolved, and eventually the search stopped. I'm in a psychiatric hospital now. They say I'm here for my good, to protect me from myself. But I know the truth. I know that what I saw that night was real. My daughter was taken away by something that shouldn't exist, and no one believes me. I've been told that my wife stopped visiting me, unable to bear the thought that I've lost my mind, that I've done something to my daughter. The night they brought me here, I overheard the doctors talking among themselves. They think it was all a figment of my imagination, a nervous breakdown brought on by the stress of the accident. No one will ever believe me. I can't stop thinking about what happened to my daughter and where she might be now if she's still alive. I will never know. Sometimes I try to pretend that what happened was a lie, but it's getting harder and harder for me to say logical things. I guess I'm losing my mind. Although I often wonder, did this start happening before or after that night?
What is the strangest thing that has ever happened to you? Have you ever found something that threw away everything you believed? Something that you were convinced was just fables? Let me tell you that it has happened to me and my friends, but unfortunately, I am the only one who can tell the story. It all started with an invitation that no one expected. Jason, one of the more reserved guys in our group, suggested we spend the weekend at his cabin in the woods. He had never been the type to share his stuff. His cabin was his sanctuary, and he rarely talked about it. So we were all surprised when he proposed the plan. At first, we thought maybe he just wanted to unwind a bit, get away from the city, and take the opportunity to relax with friends. But there was something a bit odd about his attitude. Jason had always been a bit of a control freak, worried about someone breaking something or messing up his place. This time, however, he was strangely relaxed, almost excited about the idea of us all going. His change in attitude did not go unnoticed, but no one said anything. After all, maybe this was a unique opportunity we could never have again. So we agreed, and the plan stood. The trip was uneventful. We drove for a few hours until we reached the place. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere and was surrounded by a dense forest that we didn't know how far it extended. As soon as we arrived, Jason insisted that we explore the forest, but we were all tired from the trip. We told him we'd better do it the next day. He seemed a bit disappointed, which caught our attention even more. He was never one of those adventurous people who like to get out of the house. Although at the time we were surprised for the best, maybe Jason wasn't as boring as we thought. We settled in, prepared some food, and started drinking. Laughter and stories took over the night, but there was something about Jason that got on my nerves. Every time I met his eyes, I felt like he was watching me in a strange way, like he was analyzing me. It was unsettling, but I laughed it off. Jason just laughed but continued to stare when I didn't see him. We stayed in the cabin even though Jason kept suggesting we go out into the woods. I could tell he wasn't happy with our decision to stay inside. Soon after, we all went to bed. We would have all the next morning to explore, although I wouldn't sleep that night. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange feeling, as if someone was watching me. And there he was, Jason in his bed, staring at me from across the room. His eyes seemed to glow in the dark as if reflecting the little light that came through the window. He didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. He just looked at me. I wanted to ask him what he was doing, but I felt strangely intimidated by my friend I had known since I was a kid. I looked down, trying to ignore him, and leaned back. I didn't want to appear paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting, or maybe Jason had had too much to drink. The next day, I woke up again to the screams of my friends. It was 4 a.m. I felt a momentary relief that Jason wasn't looking at me this time. However, when I went out to the dining room, I found my friends upset. One of them, Mark, was pale and shaking. "Hey man, are you okay?" "We couldn't find Jason or Tommy." It was at that moment that they told me everything. A few minutes before, one of them woke up to a noise and noticed that our friends were not there. We waited for them for a while, but they didn't come back. We looked all over the cabin. Their things were still there, which made everything stranger. If they had gone for a walk, why didn't they call? Didn't they take anything with them? Why would they be out at this hour? We decided to go to the forest to look for them. After a while, we heard a scream from the trees in the distance. It was Tommy's voice. We ran in the direction where the scream came from, but when we arrived, the scene we found was as horrible as it was unexpected. Tommy's body was lying on the ground, gutted. But what was most disturbing was that, based on the condition of the body, it appeared to have been dead for several hours. We didn't understand how we could have heard his screams so clearly. In the distance, through the trees, I saw a figure moving quickly. It was Jason. He was moving deeper and deeper into the forest. We called his name, but he didn't respond. He just kept going as if he hadn't seen Tommy's body. We started to follow him at full speed. We had no idea we were heading into a trap. We moved deeper and deeper into the forest, but soon realized that we were losing Jason's trail. The atmosphere was getting darker, and a strange smell of damp earth and blood surrounded us. To be honest, I just wanted to get out of there. I was terrified. I couldn't stay another second in that place, and neither my friends. But we couldn't leave Jason like that, not after what had happened to Tommy. Suddenly, the sound of branches snapping all around us put us on alert. It was as if something big was moving through the trees. That wasn't Jason. That's when we saw it. Jason appeared again, but this time he wasn't walking like a normal person. He was moving like a spider, his limbs bent unnaturally as he glided along the ground. It couldn't be him. Something was wrong. Before we could react, he jumped on one of my friends, sinking his teeth into his neck. Blood splattered as my friend fell to the ground, dead in seconds. Unable to react to what was in front of us, Mark and I ran directionless, running deeper and deeper into the woods. I could hear my friend screaming in the distance, begging me not to leave him behind. None of this made any sense. That being identical to Jason had bitten his neck and killed him, there was no way he was screaming at us. Suddenly, a strange being appeared in our path. It wasn't Jason, but it wasn't something I recognized either. His pale skin and empty eyes made him look like a nightmare come true. Recognize that being. I was always a big fan of urban legends, and this being was just like the one in the Skinwalker photo that had been popularized on the internet. We didn't have time to stop and think, we just knew we had to run. We turned in another direction, trying to escape from this monster. Every time I looked back, I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. That thing that was chasing us was closing the distance. With a stroke of luck, I reached the cabin and found the truck, but when I got there, I realized I was alone. Mark was gone. I didn't even want to think that something had happened to him or that he was lost. I got into the truck and was about to accelerate it. Then, I heard it. It was Mark's voice, and it was coming from the woods. He was yelling at me in desperation, asking me to wait for him, not to leave without him, that he was being chased. At that moment, I had to make a decision. These beings were imitating the voices of my friends, but what if this was Mark? I couldn't make a decision. If I was wrong, my friend would die. I thought quickly as I listened to the voice getting closer and closer, and that's when I made the most impulsive decision I've ever made in my life. I started the engine and accelerated the truck as fast as I could. I drove without stopping, fear still pulsing in my veins. I didn't look back once, afraid to see Jason or the other monster chasing me, or at least that's what I told myself. What I was really afraid of was seeing Mark, and knowing that I made the wrong decision. The road back to town seemed endless, but I finally reached a safer area where I could stop and try to figure out what had happened. I tried to call the police, but my phone had no signal in that area. It was then that reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. I had left my friends behind, with no idea what had happened to them. Guilt and fear hit me hard, but I knew I couldn't go back. What I had seen in the forest was not of this world, and I could not face it again. I had already escaped. Why would I go back? To die like them? I survived, and that's a lot more than what had to have happened. When I finally got through to the authorities, I told them what had happened, even though I knew they wouldn't believe me. I was surprised when they told me that they had received similar reports in that area in the past. It seems that in the area around the cabin, they were much more open to these things than I was, although they still reported what happened as disappearances. They only found Jason's corpse, so I don't know if that voice was Mark's. To this day, I still wonder if I made the right decision. Although, given the circumstances, I suppose there was no right decision. They were just decisions, and I made the decision that made me be here now, alive, and telling you this story. Oh, and one more thing. Remember I told you that they found Jason's body? Because of that body, the police suspected me for a moment and thought I was lying to them. Do you know why? Because they found out that that body had been dead longer than the one I told them about. You know what that means, don't you? That he was with us, that he invited us to the cabin. It wasn't Jason, and it never was.
The first thing people notice about this story is his name, but that is never where it really begins. It begins with how safe I thought I was, how convinced I was that nothing truly bad could happen. I tell this now because silence helped him for too long, and because pretending it was just a bad relationship almost killed me. When I met Lawrence, he was already known. Not famous, but close enough that people recognized him in bars and restaurants. Close enough that strangers smiled at him like he had already proven something. He spoke softly, smiled easily, and never raised his voice in public. He liked to say he respected women, and people believed him because he said it so calmly. At the beginning, he treated me like something fragile he wanted to protect. He insisted on driving me everywhere, paying for everything, and planning my days around his schedule. When I thanked him, he corrected me and said I didn't need to thank him for being a man. I thought that sounded mature. I thought it meant stability. What I did not understand yet was that protection, when you do not ask for it, slowly turns into a cage. The control did not arrive violently, and that is why I missed it. It arrived wrapped in concern, in advice, in long explanations about danger and stress, and how people like him lived under constant pressure. He told me I did not need to work so much. He told me my friends were careless. He told me the city was not safe for someone like me. Before anything physical happened, my world became very small. He did not forbid me from leaving the house at first, but he made it exhausting. Every plan required a discussion. Every errand came with questions. If I wanted to go out alone, he wanted updates. If I stayed too long, he wanted reasons. It was easier to stay home than to explain myself. The drinking became impossible to ignore. Bottles appeared faster than they disappeared. He started missing training sessions and laughed about it like it was a joke the coaches just did not get. When the suspension came after he drove drunk, the joke ended and the house changed. He stayed home all day, watching games, replays, interviews, and old highlights. Football never stopped. Each touchdown replay felt like it pulled something dark out of him, something tight and restless that needed an outlet. I did not know yet that I was becoming that outlet. After the suspension, the tension stopped hiding. The days grew heavier, slower, and more dangerous because I never knew which version of him I would face. Sometimes he ignored me completely, sitting inches from the screen with a drink in his hand, jaw clenched, eyes fixed like the game was happening inside his head. Other times he followed me through the house, correcting how I walked, how I cleaned, how I spoke. Before the first real beating, there were hours of pressure that felt unbearable. One afternoon, he accused me of distracting him during a game. I was standing behind the couch, not speaking, not moving, just existing in the room. He stood up suddenly, grabbed my arm, and squeezed until my fingers went numb. He did not shout. He spoke slowly and told me I needed to learn when to disappear. When I tried to pull away, he shoved me backward into the wall. My head hit hard enough to make my vision blur. He stared at me afterward, breathing heavy, like he was waiting for something from me. When I started crying, he walked away in disgust. From that day on, fear became part of my routine. I moved carefully. I spoke less. I slept lightly. I learned the sound of his steps and the rhythm of his drinking. I knew when to stay silent and when to answer quickly. None of it was enough. The night he dragged me to the basement did not begin with shouting. It began with football highlights playing too loudly and him drinking faster than usual. I tried to stay upstairs, but he called my name, slow and sharp, and I knew ignoring him would only make things worse. When I reached the living room, he accused me of disrespecting him, of planning to leave, of thinking I was better than him. Before I could move away, he grabbed my hair and pulled me toward the stairs. I tried to hold on to the railing, but he kicked my hands away and dragged me step by step, my back hitting each edge, my body twisting in ways that left bruises everywhere. The pain was loud and constant, and he did not stop even when I screamed. The basement was dark, cold, and empty. He threw me inside, locked the door, and turned the light off. For 5 days, that room was my entire world. He gave me little water, never enough to feel okay, just enough to keep me alive. Once a day, he threw in a piece of hard bread like I was an animal. He told me this was what happened to women who forgot their place. He told me no one would come. He told me I deserved it. The psychological damage was worse than the hunger. He came down randomly, sometimes calm, sometimes furious, sometimes drunk and rambling. He made me beg. He laughed when I cried. He threatened to leave me there forever. By the 3rd day, I stopped counting time and started counting footsteps. When he finally unlocked the door and pulled me upstairs, my legs barely worked. Before the final assault, the house felt like it was holding its breath. I told him I was leaving. I said it clearly. I said it slowly. I said I would go to the police. His reaction was immediate and terrifying because there was no explosion, no screaming, no warning. He pushed me against the wall and wrapped his hands around my neck. His grip was steady, calculated, and strong. I tried to hit him, but my arms were weak from days without food. The pressure increased slowly, like he wanted me to understand exactly what was happening. The room spun. My lungs burned, my thoughts scattered. I could hear the television behind him, the crowd cheering as if nothing in the world was wrong. When I collapsed, he let go. I hit the floor and could not move. He stepped over me, grabbed another drink, and passed out on the couch. I stayed still for a long time, afraid that even breathing might wake him. I escaped while he slept. I did not take anything with me. I did not look back. I ran until my chest hurt and my vision blurred, then I ran more. When the police arrived, they took photos, wrote reports, and promised protection. He was arrested, then released, then protected by the same system that loved his talent more than it cared about my life. Years passed, but his violence did not stop. Arrests followed him. Charges piled up. Guards reported attacks. Cellmates feared him. His behavior grew more unstable, more dangerous, until it finally ended the only way it ever could. When I heard what he did in prison and what he did to himself afterward, my body reacted before my mind did. Cold, shaking, numbness. Justice came late, but it came loud. Every football game reminds me how easily violence is excused when talent is involved. People ask why I stayed, why I didn't leave sooner, why I didn't see it coming. The truth is simple and ugly. Fear works slowly, control hides well, and monsters rarely look like monsters at the beginning.
Lawrence Phillips was a former NFL and college football star whose career was marked as much by extreme violence as by athletic talent. Despite repeated incidents of domestic abuse and criminal behavior during his playing years, he continued to be protected by teams and institutions as long as he performed on the field. After his career ended, the violence escalated rather than stopped. In 2015, while serving a prison sentence for multiple offenses, Phillips murdered his cellmate and later took his own life.
The first serious threat came after a Friday night game, when the football player Aaron Hernandez leaned close and calmly explained where I lived, how long it took me to get home, and what time my lights usually turned off. He said it like he was giving directions, not like a warning. And that was when I understood this was not part of the game anymore. I worked as a football referee for years, long enough to learn that players never forgive calls they think are unfair. Most of the time, anger stays on the field, and it burns out once the game ends. Sometimes it follows you, but you learn to ignore it because stopping feels like letting them win. Being Latino added another layer that the league never really wanted to talk about. Insults were disguised as jokes, and threats were dismissed as heat-of-the-moment reactions. Reports were filed, meetings were held, and nothing actually changed. Aaron Hernandez was different from the rest. He did not shout to impress his teammates, and he didn't lose control in obvious ways. He watched, he waited, and he spoke when he knew no one else was listening. The harassment became routine, slowly, which made it harder to explain and easier to deny. Cars followed me after games, always keeping the same distance, always turning away right before I reached my street. My car was scratched more than once, and the damage was too deliberate to be random. Aaron and a few other players made sure I noticed them outside the stadium. They parked near my house on different nights, sometimes sitting there without music, without talking, just watching. When I confronted the league, they suggested changing my route home and avoiding public places. My closest support was Mateo, another referee who had dealt with the same group of players. He understood the pressure because he felt it too, and we talked constantly about how long we could keep doing this before something went wrong. The game that changed everything was tense from the start. The crowd was aggressive, the bench was loud, and Aaron never stopped staring at us. It felt organized, not emotional, like they were waiting for an excuse. Before the first major incident, there was a long stretch where nothing happened, and that silence made everyone uneasy. Players stood too close after plays. Conversations stopped when we approached, and the bench reacted to every call with hostility. When Mateo called a late hit, Aaron stepped forward immediately, getting close enough that his helmet touched. His voice was low but clear, and he promised Mateo would regret humiliating him in front of everyone. Several players laughed, while others watched carefully like they were memorizing the moment. Later, Aaron delivered another illegal hit, and Mateo ejected him without hesitation. The reaction was violent, with players shouting, security hesitating, and objects thrown from the stands. Aaron walked off slowly, turning back just once to smile at us, as if this was exactly what he wanted. After the game, we waited inside longer than usual, listening to shouting outside and watching shadows move past the windows. Mateo admitted he was scared, not of losing his job, but of what would happen once we left the stadium. That fear stayed with us in the following days, growing stronger instead of fading, especially when calls and messages started coming from unknown numbers late at night. Mateo was killed 3 days after the game, and the police said the attack was intentional and personal. His body had been mutilated, and the level of violence made it clear that this was meant to send a message, rather than hide a crime. Before the package arrived, there was another quiet stretch that felt wrong, like something was being prepared. When I opened my door and saw the box on my porch, my body reacted before my thoughts did, and I stepped back instead of picking it up. Inside was one of Mateo's severed body parts, wrapped carefully, without any note or explanation. The message was obvious, and I spent the rest of that day sitting on the floor, listening for sounds that didn't belong in my house. That night, a car parked across the street with its headlights on, and it stayed there until morning. When I looked outside, someone inside raised a hand slowly, as if waving. I stopped sleeping after that, and every sound inside my home felt like a warning. The attacks became direct after the package. Someone entered my house while I was out and moved furniture just enough to be noticed. Doors were left unlocked, drawers were opened, and personal items were placed where I couldn't ignore them. The most dangerous incident happened in a grocery store parking lot during one afternoon. I noticed footsteps behind me, and then I was hit from the side, hard enough to knock me down. I was dragged between cars, while someone whispered my name and reminded me that quitting would not erase what I had done. They kicked me until I stopped trying to get up, and one of them pressed a knee into my chest while explaining that Aaron Hernandez never got disrespected. When they left, they warned me that the next visit would be worse. I was taken to the hospital and questioned again by police, who repeatedly said that they were doing everything they could. I didn't believe them. I stopped leaving my house unless it was absolutely necessary. After the attack, the fear stopped feeling situational and became constant, following me even inside places that were supposed to be safe. I stopped answering the phone entirely because every ring made my body tighten, and when I checked the voicemail later, I found recordings of heavy breathing and low voices repeating my name, slowly. One message mentioned the street where I lived and described the color of the car parked outside that night, and that detail alone was enough to convince me that someone was always nearby, paying attention to every movement I made. A few days later, I realized someone had been inside my apartment again, but this time, while I was home. I noticed when I found my bedroom door partially opened, even though I clearly remembered closing it. The television was muted, the remote placed carefully on the table, and one of my shoes was moved to the middle of the room, as if to make sure I would see it immediately. I stood there for a long time without moving, listening to the sounds of the building, trying to understand if I was alone or if someone was still watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. When Aaron was arrested for an unrelated murder days later, people assumed the danger had passed. I knew better, because the fear did not disappear. It settled in. Aaron Hernandez received a life sentence, but the relief people expected never came. The damage was already done. I live quietly now, but I never feel alone, even when no one's around. Sounds still wake me, and I still check locks more than once. This story is not about football anymore. It's about what happens when violence is allowed to grow unchecked, and how easily it crosses lines that cannot be undone. I'm telling this because silence did not protect Mateo, and it did not protect me, and because fear does not disappear just because a case is closed. Aaron Hernandez was a former NFL tight end whose rapid rise to fame collapsed after his involvement in multiple violent crimes. In 2013, he was arrested and later convicted for the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player who had been dating his fiance's sister. As investigations expanded, Hernandez was also linked to other shootings, revealing a pattern of paranoia, aggression, and criminal behavior that had gone unnoticed during his career. He took his life in prison in 2017.
People think obsession is easy to spot. That's not true. Obsession can sound calm, reasonable, and even caring when you first hear it, and that's how it slips into your life without asking for permission. I met Galen when I was barely holding things together. I was working, studying, and trying to act older than I felt. He was charming in a strange way, confident when talking about football, especially college football, like it was the only thing in the world that made sense to him. At first, that focus felt reassuring, like he had something solid to stand on. He talked about the Colorado Buffaloes constantly, but one player's name always came up: Ray Caruth. Galen talked about him like you talk about someone you actually knew, someone whose choices mattered beyond the field. I didn't question it back then because I didn't know what I was listening to yet. When I got pregnant, everything accelerated. There was no long discussion, no real planning. We moved in together because neither of us could afford not to. The house was small, the walls were thin, and every sound traveled, which meant there was never any real privacy or silence. At that point, I still believed things could stabilize. I didn't know I was already inside a story that was heading somewhere violent. Galen's admiration didn't stay abstract. It turned physical, visual, and constant. He started dressing like Caruth, copying old photos and game footage down to the smallest details. Same jackets, same posture, same way of walking into a room like everyone should notice. He didn't just talk about Caruth, he studied him. He repeated phrases Carruth used in interviews, adjusted his voice to match his tone, and even practiced expressions in the mirror. It stopped feeling like fandom and started feeling like rehearsal. Our conversations narrowed fast. Everything led back to Carruth. Money problems, relationships, responsibility, fatherhood. Galen always framed it the same way, saying the world punishes men who get trapped by expectations. He said football players were proof of that. Before the arguments, there was always a stretch of silence that felt deliberate. He would sit scrolling through court documents or watching interviews, barely blinking, barely reacting. When I mentioned separating, he didn't raise his voice. He smiled and explained why that wouldn't work. He talked about unity, legacy, and not repeating mistakes. Even though I never said those words myself, I started to feel like my role in my own life was shrinking. The first physical incident happened during one of those long silences, when I tried to leave the room to avoid another lecture about loyalty and sacrifice. His hand closed around my wrist, not crushing it, but firm enough to stop me completely. He didn't apologize and he didn't look angry. He explained his behavior like he was correcting a misunderstanding. That night, he wore a Buffalo's jersey that barely fit him and stood in front of the mirror for a long time, adjusting it and talking quietly to himself. I stayed on the bed listening, trying to slow my breathing while my thoughts raced in circles I couldn't control. Before the next incident, tension built in smaller ways. He slept less, paced more, and muttered names and dates like they were instructions. He stopped asking how I felt and started telling me what I was supposed to feel. When the news about Carruth's arrest came out, I expected denial or anger. Instead, Galen reacted with calm approval. He watched the coverage closely and nodded along as if each detail confirmed something he already believed. He made a hard choice. Some people don't understand what it takes. The way he said hard choice stayed with me, because it sounded less like commentary and more like preparation. Their star player had been accused of murdering his pregnant partner to avoid paying child support. It disgusts me just thinking about it. Meanwhile, we were going to have a child together. For me, Gail's unhealthy obsession with Ray ended there. After that, Galen changed, not explosively, but methodically. He started attending court hearings, sitting quietly in the back, taking notes and coming home energized. He talked about respect, about controlling the narrative, about how history remembers men who act decisively. Before every argument, there was a heavy buildup where he watched footage late into the night, pausing and rewinding specific moments. I could hear him breathing faster, tapping his fingers, whispering comments under his breath. When I finally said I was leaving, I expected yelling or threats. Instead, he stayed calm, which made everything worse. He told me leaving would complicate things and that complicated situations force people to make mistakes. You're not thinking clearly right now. I moved in with my sister and blocked his number. For a few days, nothing happened. That absence felt artificial, like the pause before something breaks. Then messages started arriving from unfamiliar numbers. Long messages explaining why separation would hurt everyone involved, why suffering could be avoided, why decisive action was sometimes mercy. I stopped reading them halfway through, but the tone lingered in my head. At night, I kept replaying his voice, not loud or aggressive, but certain, as if certainty itself could justify anything. The day he came to my sister's house, tension filled the space long before I saw him. Every sound outside made my attention snap toward the door, and my thoughts jumped ahead faster than I could slow them down. When his voice came through the door, it was controlled and steady, like he was trying not to alarm anyone nearby. I didn't open it right away. I stood there listening, focusing on his breathing, on the rhythm of his words, trying to predict his next move. When he forced the door open, he didn't rush me. He stepped inside calmly and closed it behind him, as if this was a private conversation that had been interrupted earlier. "You're not going to ruin my life. Gail is right, you shouldn't exist. I'm ruined because of you and the future baby." I backed away toward the kitchen, keeping distance without freezing. He followed at the same pace, explaining himself, describing a future where problems didn't exist anymore. His hand moved toward his jacket, slow and deliberate. I grabbed a lamp and swung it, hitting his arm hard enough to make him step back. He adjusted quickly and kept moving, his expression tightening but never breaking into panic. When he grabbed my hair, pain shot through my scalp, but I didn't stop moving. I hit his face with my elbow, felt the impact, and used the moment to break free. I ran, screaming, not stopping until neighbors came out and someone called the police. After his arrest, everything felt unreal. I gave my statement multiple times, each version feeling less connected to my body, like I was describing events that happened to someone else. I didn't feel brave or relieved. I felt emptied out. In court, he never looked at me. He stared forward, wearing that same serious expression. The restraining order and sentence followed. I raised my child alone. Sometimes I still think about how calm Galen was, even at the worst moments, and how certainty can be more dangerous than anger. I don't feel victorious. I tell this story so others understand that terror doesn't always announce itself. This story mentions Ray Caruth, an NFL wide receiver whose career ended after he orchestrated the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Sharika Adams, in 1999. Caruth arranged for Adams to be ambushed and shot while he followed in another car. Adams survived long enough to give birth to their son, who was left with permanent brain damage. Caruth was convicted for his role in the crime and sentenced to prison, becoming one of the most notorious criminal cases involving a professional football player.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I'm a former NFL player, and this is an experience I had back when I was playing football nationally. I still remember the day when I was drafted into the NFL. It was like a dream come true for me. Back when I was in college, my coach used to always tell me that I would make it big, and I did. But little did I know that being in the spotlight in front of the whole nation playing football would be so pressuring. Playing with teams that I had always admired from afar was a boon and a bane in its own way. Even the players on my own team were guys that I had been a fan of. Slowly but surely, the spotlight and the pressure started to affect my game, and for 2 consecutive games, I was benched. My teammates could see that I was struggling to handle the pressure and that our team was suffering because of it. That's when I decided that I had to do something about it and step up my game. So I decided to ask my coach to put a word in with the stadium authorities to allow me to practice every night all by myself. My coach was a nice and kind-hearted man, and he had seen my struggles firsthand. So he spoke to the authorities, and soon enough, I was granted access to the stadium every night. At first, I struggled to play alone as football is a team game. But soon I realized what my mistakes were, and I started working on them. Some nights, my coach would accompany me, but most of the nights, I was alone. My solo practice might have gone for about a few weeks when we had a big match coming up. The team that we were going up against was the nation's best back then, and truth be told, I was utterly terrified of playing against them. Even though my teammates have played against them, they had never won, and this cannot be even more. The night before the big match, all my teammates were resting in preparation for the next day's big event, but I was on edge. I was in the stadium sweating myself on the field. It wasn't easy playing against all those big faces, but I was determined to prove myself. That's when I heard somebody walking on the field. I turned and saw a familiar face, a face that I did not expect to see in the stadium so late at night. Now, let's call this player Joe Maxfield, as I do not want to reveal his true identity. But he was one of the star players of the opposite team, the team that we were going up against the next day. He was totally clad in his football gear and had a ball in his hand. It looked like he too wanted to practice one last time before the big game. I was stunned to see him, but continued practicing myself. A few minutes later, he walked towards me and spoke.
Hey man, how are you? You must be the new kid drafted by your team, right?
I was so awestruck that for a few seconds, I just kept looking at him with a ball in my hand and my mouth ajar. When he chuckled, looking at me, I controlled myself and spoke. Yeah, I'm the one.
So what you been doing here so late at night? Preparing for tomorrow's game?
Yes, sir. I replied.
Me too, man. I am worried about playing against your team, too. We might have won against them all the time, but those are tough players, and so are you.
I honestly had nothing to say to him, so I just looked at him, dumbfounded. He chuckled again and said,
Want to play with me tonight?
It would be an honor, sir, I replied. So for the next 2 hours, I played with probably the greatest player of our age, and he was the nicest, friendliest person I had ever come across. He gave me a lot of tips, corrected me when I was wrong, and also shared some secrets about the playing tactics of his own team. I had never expected to share a moment with such a great player, but there I was, learning from the best player of our generation. By the time we were done, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said,
Don't let the lights, the bling, all the watching eyes, and the pressure from the media get to you, kid. You focus on your game and see how it goes from there.
That was truly the best piece of advice somebody had given me till that day. Soon we said goodbye and promised to see each other the next day. I drove back to my hotel room with a satisfied mind and a happy heart. The next day I was woken up by my teammates, and all of them looked utterly sad. I instantly knew that something was wrong. Something terrible had happened, but I just did not know what. Hey guys, what's going on? What's happening? I asked them. Hey bro, do you know Joe passed away? They say he had a heart attack in his sleep. Man, it was so unexpected. We were supposed to play against this team tonight, and he's no more. I think the match has been canceled. Jeff, one of my teammates, told me. Wait, what do you mean Joe has passed away? When did this happen? They say it was probably yesterday or around midnight. Nothing has been clear yet, but the news is confirmed that Joe Maxfield is no more. Jeff confirmed once again. I just sat in the bed thinking to myself, how would it be possible? As I was playing with him into the early hours of the morning. I knew no one would believe me if I told them what happened last night. Soon, we were all officially informed that the game had been canceled and that Joe had died around midnight. The whole nation was grieving the loss of a legend, but I was still confused as hell. A few days later, I got my answers when me and my teammates attended Joe's funeral. When I walked near the coffin, I kid you not, I saw Joe's lips tilt upward a bit. The moment was so minute that only my eyes caught it. But it was as if he was trying to tell me and reassure me that he was there with me that night. After that day, I never looked back and took his advice. And now, years later, I am a successful NFL player who had recently retired. After his funeral, I searched the internet to investigate Joe's early life before he was famous. An article in a magazine said that Joe too struggled with the same problem I was struggling with, and one night he met someone who changed his life forever. Now that I look at it after so many years, I think Joe's spirit was trying to pass on the kindness he had experienced once upon a time at the start of his career.
My name is Adam. I'm 18 years old, and I'm not someone who likes a lot of drama. I live in a small town where everything seems to repeat itself day after day. Everything's always the same. No big surprises. My sister Emma is 10 years old, and since her parents work late, I have to pick her up from school. No big deal, really. Just a walk of about 15 minutes that we always do together. The route is always the same. We pass the same street in front of the same houses. One of them, however, always caught my eye. Not because it's particularly old or strange, but because in its garden, there's something I don't like, even though I haven't told anyone. A scarecrow with a pumpkin hat. The body is simple, with tattered clothes and outstretched arms like any other scarecrow. But what makes me uncomfortable is that the pumpkin always seemed to be looking in different directions. Every time I pass by, the head is turned a different way. At first I thought someone was in charge of moving it from time to time. But after so many times, I started to sense something else. Something about that thing disturbed me, although I didn't exactly know what. Worst of all, sometimes I felt like it was looking directly at me, as if its empty pumpkin eyes were pointed at me, watching me. It was absurd, but that feeling made me walk faster every time. I never told Emma about it. She didn't pay much attention to the scarecrow. I think I was the only one who noticed it that much. She didn't pay much attention to the scarecrow. Something inside me told me it was better not to talk about it, not to give it more importance than I had already had in my mind. 3 days ago, like any other day, I went to pick up Emma from school. The day had been exhausting, and the truth is the last thing I wanted to do was go through that damn house again. But I did, as usual. However, this time something was different. The scarecrow was gone. I stopped dead in front of the house. I looked around, trying to see if he had been moved somewhere. There was no sign of him. I stood still, checking to see if he had been put somewhere else. Then Emma tugged on my arm. Emma asked me what was wrong, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to scare her, so I told her it was nothing and just kept walking. But suddenly, a man appeared in front of us. He was an old man, with dirty clothes and messy hair. The old man had a blank stare and a tremor in his hands. We stopped in our tracks.
Have you seen him?
I didn't understand what he meant. Emma moved closer to me, as if sensing something wasn't right.
Have you seen the scarecrow? It's gone.
I replied without thinking too much, just wanting the man to move away. But instead, he took a step closer to us, a crooked smile on his face.
Be careful. He's mad at you. He doesn't like you looking at him so much.
Wait, you're the one who's always moving the scarecrow?
No, I don't touch him. He won't let me touch him. Seriously, though, be careful. He talks to me in my sleep. He tells me you look at him. If he's gone, maybe it's for something.
Uncomfortable and looking out for Emma, I made us keep walking and ignored him. Emma was scared, but I told her not to worry. There are always crazy people on the street. But that same night, I couldn't stop thinking about the old man. How did he know I used to watch the scarecrow? When I went to sleep, the first thing that came to my mind was the scarecrow. The pumpkin with its empty smile, and the eyes that always seemed to be more attentive than they should. That feeling followed me until I finally fell asleep. That's when the nightmare started. I was in my room, unable to move. My eyes were open, but my body was completely paralyzed. I tried to move my hands and feet, but nothing. Terror invaded me when I realized that something was in the room with me. In front of me, in the corner, was the scarecrow. But it wasn't the same one I had seen in the garden of the house. No, this one was alive. Its eyes, or the holes where they should be, glowed with a strange light, and its gourd seemed to writhe as if something was moving inside it. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. Then, from the holes in the pumpkin, worms began to come out. First one, then hundreds, thousands. They slowly advanced toward me, crawling across the floor, across my bed, and across my body. I felt them crawling into my ears, into my mouth, into my eyes. It was an indescribable horror. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could only feel how those creatures entered my body. And then, I woke up. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart beating a mile a minute. It took me a moment to realize that it had all been a dream. I staggered to my feet, my head spinning, and went to the kitchen for a glass of water to calm down. When I returned before going back to bed, I looked out the window into the courtyard. What I saw froze me in my tracks. There, in the middle of the garden, was the scarecrow. My first impulse was to go out. I wanted to see it up close, to confirm that it wasn't another nightmare. I took courage and opened the door, walking towards the pumpkin that was perfectly placed at the top. I looked at it closely. The smile was still there, empty and crooked, but there was nothing strange about it. No worms, no light, just a pumpkin, motionless. But when I turned around to go back, I felt a pressure on the back of my head. Something was squeezing my skull hard. I fell to my knees, screaming in pain. The pressure was increasing. It felt like my head was going to explode. The bones began to crunch and the pain became unbearable. The scarecrow was squeezing me. It was moving as if it were a person. I could feel my skull cracking into 1,000 pieces. My eyes were popping out. I could only see red. The blood coming out of my eye sockets had blurred all my vision. And then, suddenly, I woke up again. My breathing was agitated, my body trembling. I had fallen asleep again. Or maybe I had never woken up in the first place. I had no idea what had happened. I looked at the clock. It was early morning, but I couldn't go back to sleep. I got up again, this time more calmly, trying to convince myself that everything that was happening wasn't real, that they were just dreams provoked by the old man and his words. I went to the courtyard again, looking for some sign of what I had seen before. But there was nothing. The scarecrow was gone. I returned to my room, calmer, though still with an uneasy feeling. But as I entered, I fell to the floor in surprise. I pinched myself to see if it was a dream. But no, I was awake. On my bed rested a pumpkin, identical to the one on the scarecrow.
How many of you have been on the deep web? And no, I'm not talking about the child's play of downloading to enter the first level of the deep web and then leaving. That's for amateurs. I mean, how many of you have been on the real deep web? The part of the deep web where scary things really happen. Where the government hides all the secrets and where red rooms are rampant. Unless you're hackers, I don't think you've been there. So I have to tell you a story. A story where you'll learn that no matter how prepared you are for the deep web, there will always be someone or something that will surprise you. I still remember everything as if it was yesterday. The date was February 14th, 2022. I remember because it was Valentine's Day, shortly before my girlfriend and I had separated. She simply contacted me by phone and crying said that everything between us was over. I didn't understand why, but when I tried to call her, she didn't answer. I went to her house worried, but some neighbors told me that she had moved a few days before and that she was with someone else. I didn't understand what happened to her, but I was heartbroken, so you can imagine how I could feel on Valentine's Day. I was going to spend that day at home exploring the deep web, going further than I had ever gone before. I was convinced that no one would catch me. I had always been a very good hacker, and after being with my ex-girlfriend who worked in computer security, I had become much better. I felt invulnerable. I felt that no one could catch me, no matter what files I investigated and whose files they were. The more I researched, the deeper I got into the deep web. I felt I was close to reaching my limits, close to discovering something and maybe get into trouble. That would be a fun activity for Valentine's Day. As I continued to move forward, a pop-up surprised me. A pop-up on the deep web? I must admit I was very surprised. There are no advertisements on the deep web. This had to be something directed at me. But how could they do that? How could they direct a message to me? Did anyone know what I was doing? That was impossible. I had taken all the necessary measures so that no one would launch an attack on me. When I saw the pop-up, I noticed that it looked like an advertisement. Or rather, an invitation. It looked like an invitation to play a game. Suddenly, a text window opened. Someone started talking to me. Normally, I wouldn't talk to him as this can bring consequences. But his message left me so perplexed that I had to reply. Hi, Rick. You seem to be a very curious guy. Would you like to play a game with us? No, thanks. I think I'm good. Maybe another day I'll do it. I decided to answer him sarcastically, but not be so confrontational either. He may have been uncomfortable with that message, but I decided not to indulge him. I wouldn't ask him how he knew my name or anything about this game since that's what he expected me to do. I assumed that the attacker was related to the government entity I was investigating. Although I never assumed that these people would send me these kind of messages. Part of me thought it made sense. After all, I was on the deep web. Rick, unfortunately, I have to insist that you play. Otherwise, your ex-girlfriend will never be released. Reading this, I was shocked. How could he possibly have said that? And how did he know about my girlfriend? How could he say that she was kidnapped? At that moment, I realized something that terrified me and made me discover that I was involved in something really serious. You're not from any government entity, are you? The game is simple. You just have to guess where I am. It's not too hard, is it? You only have one chance to guess right. I can be behind your bathtub, hidden in the kitchen, or in the basement. As I read these words, I was completely paralyzed. From one moment to the next, I went from being bored at home, sad to arrive on Valentine's Day without my girlfriend, and in the next few minutes, I was worried that there was a psychopath in my house. There's no way this psycho is really here. He has to be lying. We both know I'm not lying, Rick. Upon reading this message, I immediately disconnected the webcam and microphone from my computer. Did you really think you were going to scare me by hacking my webcam? Who says I hacked your webcam? Don't you understand that I'm in your house? If you don't give me an answer in the next 3 minutes, I will kill your girlfriend. Reading that message, I was completely perplexed. There was no way. How could he hear me if I disconnected my webcam? Unless he had microphones installed in the house. That means that he could be in my house. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Desperate and without thinking, I went to the kitchen to get a knife and started checking the places that the man told me he could be. I knew it was a very bad idea. I knew I could die for this, but the fact that he told me that my girlfriend was trapped and kidnapped made me make a quick decision without thinking. I had to search as soon as possible. I quickly checked the kitchen with a knife in hand, but there was no one there. There was no place to hide in the kitchen either. Clearly, the man wanted me to quickly discard this place. The next place was the bathroom. I quickly opened the bathroom doors and turned on the light. No one was there. At that moment, something caught my attention. The bathroom curtain was closed. I always leave it open. Terrified, I approached slowly with the knife. I didn't have the energy to do it. I felt like I was going to cry and drop the knife and run at any moment. But I didn't. I had to do it. I had to catch whoever was invading my house just to make sure my girlfriend was okay. With a war cry, I ran to the curtain and opened it. Behind it, there was no one. At that moment, I felt a noise behind me. I peeked through the bathroom door, and in the distance, I saw the basement door. It was opening slowly, and behind it, in the middle of all the darkness, I could make out only 2 dark eyes staring at me. I immediately ran to my room. I heard the door behind me open and someone running towards me. I didn't turn around. I just ran, and as soon as I entered my room, I locked the door. On the other side, someone was banging on it violently, trying to get in. I could hear screams full of anger, while that person was slamming the door without success, since it was a very hard door. 30 seconds! You were in my basement. There's your answer. You were in the basement. Now you're behind my door. Now let her go. Suddenly, the door started banging louder and louder. I thought they wouldn't be able to break it, but at that moment, I realized that it would surely be destroyed in a matter of seconds. And so from 1 second to the next, the door burst open with a kick and a huge man rushed in. As soon as he saw me, the man grabbed me by the hair and dragged me violently across the floor and threw me against the wall. Before I could react, the man grabbed my head again and pulled me towards the computer. As I looked at it, I saw that there was a camera in my basement. The man held a cell phone to my ear, and I heard a titular voice come out of it. You were right. I was in the basement, although you were wrong that I was behind your door. As I said, we will free your girlfriend. At that moment, it was seen on the computer camera that the closet in my basement opened, where my girlfriend's corpse fell. Our clients are very satisfied with your story. You deserve to know the truth. What have you done to her? Why? Congratulations. Your girlfriend never left you. We forced her to say that before we killed her. That neighbor who told you she moved, that was me. It was nice to meet you, although I'm sorry to tell you that your girlfriend was always in this basement, even though we cleaned it constantly so it wouldn't generate odor. Why? Because you were curious. Do you think you wouldn't attract attention in the deep levels of the deep web? A lot of my clients belong to cults, and you can't mess with these people. They have more fun than you think, and you have a lot of fun. But all good things must come to an end. And with that said, it was all over. The man casually let me go and simply walked out of the front door as if he had been a guest of mine. Meanwhile, the corpse of my girlfriend remained there, in my basement.
I could never recover from what happened. I could never again date a new girl, go on the deep web, or build any kind of trusting relationship. What happened that day has traumatized me forever. And you know what the worst part is? I feel like I'm not done yet. Sometimes I see strange people looking at me in the street with a strange smile. I don't feel that these people are the ones who attacked me, but the cult that hired them. I feel that they will always be there, watching me, having fun with me, ready to attack me when I least expect it.
Hi, my name is Richard, and I'm just a normal guy. I'm married with 2 kids. Today my kids are pretty mad at me. They both had a field trip, and I didn't let either of them go. All their friends were going, and I still decided not to let them go. They may not have understood why, but my wife did. And now you'll understand why I didn't let them go. Several years ago, when I was still in high school, we had a field trip that turned out to be the scariest experience of my life. It was a sunny fall day, the kind of day when you don't expect anything to go wrong. We were taken into an ancient forest, seemingly harmless, with narrow paths and tall trees that blocked most of the sunlight. The cool air and the crunching of the dry leaves under our feet created an environment that should have been peaceful. But, as is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. At the beginning, the trip was completely normal. We knew the tour guide, Mr. Ford, so my parents trusted him to take us on the trip. Once we got there, the school bus pulled into the forest, and Mr. Ford went to run some errands at the ranger's cabin. That's when the weirdness started to happen. After a few minutes of just standing around doing nothing, the tour guide came back, but this was not Mr. Ford. The tour guide was an older man with a cold and distant look on his face. He seemed very demanding and professional, though not very good with children.
Listen, guys, Mr. Ford's not feeling well, so he asked me to be his replacement. You can call me Mr. Ashford. I was a guide for a long time, and even though I don't work with kids from your school, everyone here knows me.
What happened to Mr. Ford?
Health issues. Nothing any of you would be interested in. Now I need you kids to listen to one more thing. We will continue with the trip, as long as you listen to everything I tell you to do. Understood?
With that said, the trip continued. Mr. Ashford took us deeper into the forest than we had originally planned. As we moved on, I noticed that the atmosphere was getting thicker, and the feeling of being watched came over me. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination, but something in the air wasn't right. As we moved deeper into the forest, I noticed that some of my classmates seemed uneasy, as if they felt the same way I did. Ignoring the uncomfortable feeling, the guide led us to a more secluded area, away from other groups exploring the same area. It was then that I saw him for the first time. Among the trees, a lone man dressed in rags with disheveled hair was just staring at us. His gaze was intense, almost predatory. When the guide saw him, he simply greeted him as if he were an old friend and walked on, ignoring the puzzled looks of the students. We continued our march, but the discomfort persisted. We felt his eyes on us. He didn't look like a simple lost hiker or a friend of Mr. Ashford's, but since he knew him, we all trusted him blindly. As we moved on, the guide led us to a clearing in the forest where we decided to take a break. We sat on fallen logs while he told us about the history of the place. As he spoke, my eyes couldn't help but search for the strange man, but he was no longer in sight. We decided to resume our walk after a brief pause. It was then that things took a darker turn. As we walked, the guide became increasingly incoherent in his explanations, as if he was losing his mind. He would laugh to himself and make jokes that were totally out of place and made no sense. It was as if he was someone else. Suddenly, the guide stopped and gave us a very strange order.
Well, guys, from now on, you'll have to look for the focal point.
What's that?
Ha! You guys look for something out of the ordinary in the forest without going too far. Sooner or later, everyone will find it. No one understood what he meant, but we obeyed. That's when strange things started to happen. My classmates began to disappear one by one. Muffled screams echoed through the forest, but when we tried to locate the source, we found nothing but shadows in the trees. When there were only a few of us left, I finally saw the man in rags again. He materialized out of the underbrush with a sadistic smile that chilled my blood. The man had an axe in his hands and was slowly approaching us. We started to back away in fear, but suddenly we were confronted by the guide, who now seemed completely unhinged. They both looked at us with merciless eyes, enjoying the palpable fear that was in the air. We tried to flee, but we were surrounded. It was then that I understood what was happening. These two men were together. Everything the guide had told us so far was a lie, an elaborate lie to get us safely off the trail. Suddenly, the two men rushed towards us, grabbing a teenager each. Some of us wanted to fight, but we were no more than 15 years old, and no one dared to stand up to them. We ran and ran. Some of us started to get lost, and then we heard their screams in the forest. They chased us through the forest faster and faster, with unhinged laughter echoing all around us. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, but I couldn't stop running. The forest seemed endless, as if we were trapped in a hellish maze. Finally, when we were on the verge of exhaustion, they cornered us in a dark clearing. They surrounded us, laughing with blood-chilling malevolence. The nightmare reached its climax when the guide, with crazed eyes, began to talk about rituals and sacrifices. "Haven't you found the focal point yet, children?" "The focal point is in the center of your breasts. It's where your heart is, and soon everyone will be able to see it. We will rip it out of your chests and show it to you before we give you to the forest." We all began to cry. We all felt that our last hour was coming and there was nothing we could do to avoid them. But it was then that I made a desperate decision. While the guide and the man were still talking about what they were going to do to us, I quickly slipped through a small space between the trees and ran as fast as I'd ever ran before. I didn't look back. I didn't think of anything but escaping from that horror. I ended up back at the hut where it had all started. I opened the doors and desperately looked for help, and that's when I found a familiar face. It was Mr. Ford, brutally butchered. I fell to the floor and vomited. I never thought I would come across such a scene. I opened the door and ran, everywhere, totally lost and bewildered. Fortunately, I managed to find help from a group of hikers who were in a busier part of the forest. We called the police, but when they returned to the place where the nightmare took place, they found no trace of the perpetrators or my missing classmates. They were never heard from again. Today, the relatives are still looking for them. But after the story I told them, they lost hope. Many have asked me if the screams I heard were those of their children. It was really very difficult to distinguish them. Today, I'm old enough to be able to think about what happened to me without crying. But you know what? It scarred me for life. As I told you before, I will never let my children go on any field trip when I'm not there to take care of them.
Hey, my name is Carson, and I'll tell you a story of how a stalker almost ruined my life. A short time ago, I installed one of those security cameras that activate every time someone rings the doorbell or approaches the door. The idea was simple, a deterrent to potential burglars or stalkers. However, nothing could stop whoever was harassing me during that time. It was a night like any other. I was home alone, engrossed in the monotony of watching TV, when I received the first notification from the camera app. At first, I thought it was just a glitch, maybe some shadow or movement caused by the wind. But the second notification made me look up from the screen. On the small screen of my phone, I saw a man standing in my doorway. His face was hidden by a hood, but his posture denoted a kind of tension. He wasn't carrying any bags or packages. He was just standing there as if waiting for something. I froze for a moment, wondering who it could be and what he might want at this time of night. I decided not to open the door and instead activated the intercom to ask him what he needed. However, all I got was an ominous silence. The figure stood motionless for a few minutes, and then, as if it had received some invisible signal, it turned and walked away. It was strange, but I thought maybe it was just a lost neighbor or someone who had taken a wrong turn. I closed the app and went back to my business, trying to forget about the strange visit. But the peace didn't last long. After a few hours, the bell rang again. This time, I was more prepared. I looked at the screen, and again, the same man was there. With his hood still covering his face, he seemed to be looking directly into the camera. I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. I opted to ignore the situation and not interact with him. But what happened next made me reconsider my decision. The figure raised his hand and slammed the door several times loudly. The sound echoed through the house, and its persistence filled me with discomfort. Getting no response, he finally withdrew again. A few days passed, and the nightly visits became an unsettling routine. Although I tried not to show it, the constant pressure began to get to me. The nights became tense, and the ringing of the bell became a kind of psychological torture. I decided to report the incident to the police, but what would they do? Without clear evidence of a threat, they couldn't do much. They suggested increasing security in the house and being vigilant, so I installed brighter lights and reinforced the locks. But the figure kept coming. The police told me they would go around the neighborhood, but I looked out at night and hardly saw them. I couldn't blame them either. This man had been stalking me for weeks. Surely the police officers would have better things to do than watch a house for weeks waiting for a stalker to decide to strike when they didn't even know if he was going to. Hell, even I didn't know if he was going to do it. Maybe I was making too much trouble for something minuscule. Or at least, that's what I thought before the night when it all happened. That night started like any other. This time, I was more attentive than ever to the appearance of that man. I was going to catch him on camera, either on the doorbell camera or on my cell phone. I didn't have to wait long after bedtime before the door started to rattle. Someone was banging on it. I ran to the front door while calling the police. As soon as I told them what was happening, I disobeyed their advice to hide in my room and wait for them to come and go to the front door. I knew the police would not arrive in time. Somehow, I had to get a picture of them. Once I was at the door, I looked through the keyhole and set up my camera. But I was shocked. There was no one there. The stalker always takes much longer to leave, usually a long time knocking on my door. Maybe he saw a policeman or a neighbor and left. Whatever the case, he had escaped me again. I went back to my room to wait for the police, but suddenly, something surprised me. What was that noise? Without thinking if I was making the right decision, I quickly ran to the source of the noise. It was coming from the dining room. Once I arrived,